The moment I walked into the courtroom, my ex-wife laughed under her breath, and her new husband shook his head. The judge went pale, his hand trembled, and he whispered, "Dear God, is that really him?" Everyone turned to stare. They had no idea who I was until. There are laughs that can heal a room, and then there's the kind my ex-wife Melissa let out the moment I walked into that courtroom. The kind that could curdle milk. A tiny, fake, nasal chuckle that said, "Oh, I still think I'm the smartest person here." That same laugh she used when pretending to understand crypto. You know the one, Bitcoin's like Monopoly money, right? Yeah, that laugh. The sound of ego in high heels. Her new husband, Brandon, sat beside her, adjusting his too-tight suit like the room owed him extra oxygen. He gave me that smirk guys give when they think they've already won. The kind of smirk that makes you want to call security just to watch him get nervous. Then he shook his head slowly, like I was a parking ticket he couldn't afford to deal with. Cute. I gave him a little nod that said, "You're about to wish you stayed home, champ." Then something strange happened. The judge froze mid-gavel, hand hovering in the air like he just realized he left the stove on. His eyes went wide, and he whispered, almost reverently, "Dear God, is that really him?" Now, let me paint this picture. A packed courtroom, lawyers, press, my ex's PR team pretending to be interested in justice, and all of them turning their heads toward me like I was a celebrity who just crashed a PDA meeting. The silence that followed, louder than Melissa's ego on a good day. See, they thought I was here to beg, to play the sad ex-husband routine. The one who shows up disheveled, muttering about what's fair, while clutching old photo albums and tissues. Oh no, not today. I was here to educate. 7 years ago, I was the quiet guy in the background. The supportive husband. The one who handled the numbers while Melissa handled the vision. I built the foundation for her little empire. The same empire she later, accidentally, claimed as hers during the divorce. Yeah, she called it a clerical oversight. Like accidentally claiming the Taj Mahal because you happened to own a potted plant. Back then, she said I lacked ambition, that I was too comfortable, that I needed to think bigger. She said it while packing her designer suitcases and taking my golden retriever, Max, with her. She left with half my patience and all my self-respect. I rebuilt both, just with better furniture. But here's the twist they didn't see coming. Ambition called me back. Not the desperate, "I'll prove you wrong" kind, nah. The calm, calculated kind that makes you smile at the chaos because you know how the movie ends. I walked in wearing a dark navy suit that screamed, "Revenge, but make it tasteful." Custom fit, clean lines, no tie, because confidence doesn't need decoration. The bailiff even straightened up when I passed. The man probably thought I was a visiting senator. Melissa's lawyer, a weasel named Pratt, adjusted his glasses, looked at me, then whispered something to her. She leaned in, eyes narrowing, that fake socialite smile cracking. She wasn't expecting me to look successful. She wanted the version of me she left, the one drowning in spreadsheets and heartbreak. Not the guy who'd turned those same spreadsheets into companies she couldn't afford to invest in now. "Mr. Reed," the judge said finally, clearing his throat. "It's been a while." "Good to see you, Your Honor," I said, voice steady. "Last time I was here, I was paying for someone else's ambition." Melissa's head snapped toward me. Brandon blinked. The courtroom chuckled softly. That little ripple of laughter you get when people sense blood in the water. I sat down next to my lawyer, Liam Cruz, my oldest friend and the only man I trust with both secrets and sarcasm. He whispered, "You sure you're ready for this?" I smirked. "Oh, I've been practicing in the mirror for 7 years. Today's the recital." The judge flipped through the files like he was browsing a bad script. "This is quite the situation. Property disputes, intellectual rights, patent ownership." He looked at Melissa. "Mrs. Turner." "It's Reed," she said quickly, then hesitated. "I mean, it was Reed. It's Turner now." I smiled sweetly. "Yeah, we upgraded her last name during the recall." Brandon muttered something under his breath, probably about me needing therapy. I ignored him. Therapy was what I'd been doing for years. Except my version came with lawyers, LLCs, and a secret I'd been saving for just this occasion. As the judge continued, my mind drifted for a moment. 7 years ago, I'd stood in this exact courtroom. Same wood paneling, same stale air, same pitying glances. Melissa had worn white that day, like irony was her favorite color. She said, Julian, I just don't feel challenged by you anymore. That line stuck with me. Not because it hurt, but because she said it like a CEO firing her intern. I remember thinking, you'll regret underestimating me. And oh, she did. The bailiff read out the case title, Reed versus Turner Holdings. It sounded poetic, like a remix of Karma with better rhythm. As the hearing began, I watched her. She kept glancing my way, tapping her nails against the desk like Morse code for panic. Her new husband whispered things to her, but she barely heard. For the first time, she looked uncomfortable. Good. The opposing lawyer started with his grand opening. Ladies and gentlemen, this case is about greed, deception, and betrayal. I almost raised my hand. You're half right, just switch sides. The judge gave me a look, the kind that says, behave, but his lips twitched like he wanted to laugh. Even he remembered the old days, the quiet Julian who never spoke up. This new version? He was enjoying the upgrade. When it was our turn, Liam stood. Smooth, confident, didn't even look at notes. Your Honor, he began, my client isn't here to argue over scraps. He's here to reclaim what was his. And, ironically, what he built. He glanced at me. He's also here because someone forgot that contracts have signatures, his. The courtroom murmured. Melissa shifted in her chair. I leaned back, crossed my legs, and watched the tension unfold like a live Netflix show. She whispered something to her lawyer, and he nodded. Then she raised her hand, trying to sound calm. Your Honor, this is absurd. My ex-husband is bitter because I moved on. This is harassment. I raised my hand. Objection to her acting career. The courtroom erupted in laughter. Even the stenographer looked like she wanted to high-five me. The judge sighed, rubbing his temples. Mr. Reed, please. Sorry, Your Honor. Old habits. Continue. Melissa glared daggers. You think this is funny? Not yet, I said. But I have good comedic timing. Brandon's face was turning red. He tried to look composed, but his jaw kept twitching. You're pathetic, he muttered loud enough for the room to hear. I looked at him with that calm, collected smile I'd perfected over years of pretending to like her cooking. Pathetic? Buddy, you married the sequel. Boom. Gasps. A few chuckles. Even the judge's clerk bit her lip to hide a grin. See, what they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I hadn't come to play defense. I came to set the stage. Everything after today would unfold exactly how I planned. This was just Act 1, and I'd written the script. I leaned forward slightly, hands clasped. Your Honor, I said, I have documentation, witnesses, and a few surprises. But before we dive in, I'd like to say something on record. The judge nodded cautiously. Go ahead. I turned toward Melissa, locking eyes with her, the kind of look that makes someone wish they had sunglasses for their soul. 7 years ago, I walked into this room a broken man. Today, I walk in as a man rebuilt, with receipts. So before anyone assumes I'm here out of spite, let's make one thing clear. I'm not here to win her back. I'm here to collect what's mine and give her something money can't buy, accountability. Silence. Absolute, beautiful silence. You could hear Brandon's ego deflate. Melissa blinked twice, then forced that fake, press-friendly smile back onto her face. But her hands trembled. She picked up a pen, dropped it, then laughed nervously. That same crypto laugh. Full circle. The judge nodded slowly. Mr. Reed, he said, voice quieter now. I think everyone here understands you perfectly. Good, I said, smiling. Because class is officially in session. That's when the gavel struck, echoing like thunder through the courtroom. People whispered. Cameras clicked. And in that brief, electric moment, I felt something shift, not in the case, but in me. For the first time in 7 years, I wasn't the quiet husband, or the forgotten ex, or the guy who lost everything. I was Julian Reed, the man who built, rebuilt, and now stood taller than the mess that tried to bury him. Melissa's laugh had started this moment years ago, the same laugh that belittled my dreams, dismissed my patience, and mocked my silence. But this time that laugh, it wasn't power. It was panic. And I swear, when she glanced away, I almost laughed too, not out of bitterness, but out of poetic satisfaction. Because that laugh, the one that started it all, it was about to echo right back where it belonged. 3 years after Melissa packed her designer luggage and my self-esteem into the same moving truck, I thought the universe had finally run out of ways to surprise me. I'd stopped expecting apologies, stopped checking her Instagram, business updates, and stopped wondering why the word karma hadn't shown up yet. Turns out, karma doesn't text back, it sends mail. And not the kind you want to open standing up. It was a random Tuesday. You know the type, slightly depressing, suspiciously quiet, and the kind of weather that makes you question if God's thermostat got stuck on meh. I was sipping burnt coffee in my kitchen/office/bachelor bunker when I heard the mailbox creak open outside. My mailman, Rick, yelled through the door like we were in a sitcom. "Julian, got something weird for you. No sender. Feels expensive." That last part got my attention. Expensive and weird? That combo only shows up for two reasons. Either you're getting sued, or life's about to get entertaining. I opened the door, and there it was, a thick, cream-colored envelope, sealed with wax like it came straight from a period drama. No return address. Just my name, Julian Reed, written in handwriting that looked like it belonged to an 18th century poet with trust issues. Rick leaned against the fence, grinning. "It ain't ticking, so that's good news." "Appreciate the vote of confidence, Rick," I said, sliding him a coffee can tip for his efforts. Inside, I sat down at the table, tore open the envelope, and braced for impact. What fell out wasn't a lawsuit. It wasn't a prank. It was a stack of legal documents, a certified will, and a short letter from the law office of Harold Stein, Melissa's late uncle. My former mentor. The man who taught me everything I knew about strategic thinking, business structure, and how to survive board meetings with billionaires who smell like cigar smoke and power. The letter was short, but it hit harder than a tax audit. "Julian, if you're reading this, I'm gone, which means the truth can finally be set right. I've left everything to you. Not Melissa. You. Because you earned it when she forgot what loyalty meant." "Harold." I blinked. Then blinked again. Then laughed. Not a chuckle, not a smirk. A full, belly-aching, can't-breathe kind of laugh. It was the first time in years I laughed so hard that my neighbor banged on the wall and yelled, "Bro, share the joke, or shut up." "Harold, you magnificent old fox," I said out loud, staring at the papers spread across my table like a Monopoly board of revenge. Her dream house? My name. Her company's core patent, the one that built her empire? My signature. Her Tesla? Technically company property, which now fell under my jurisdiction. It was as if karma had gone shopping with my old wish list and delivered express. I sat there for a solid 10 minutes, just staring at it all, grinning like a man who'd just discovered irony had a sense of humor. You ever laugh so hard that it turns into tears, and then the tears turn into disbelief, and then disbelief turns into, "Oh God, I need a lawyer before I do something stupid"? Yeah, that was me. So I called Liam Cruz. My guy. My best friend. The same lawyer who helped me survive the divorce paperwork without spontaneously combusting. He answered on the second ring, voice groggy but laced with curiosity. "Please tell me you're not calling to complain about your ex-wife's cooking show again." "Better," I said. "Remember Harold Stein?" There was a pause. "The old man with the cane and the personality of a Bond villain?" "Yeah. He left me everything." "Everything like? His mug collection, or everything? Try her company, her mansion, her Tesla, and her favorite tax deduction, the one named Turner Enterprises." Silence. Then a low whistle. "Holy hell. Karma just sent you a care package." I leaned back in my chair, still grinning. No sender. No warning. Just pure poetic justice delivered to my kitchen table. Liam chuckled. "So what's the plan?" "Simple," I said. "Time to clean the mess." "Yours or hers?" I smirked. "Same thing." We met at his office the next morning. Liam's firm wasn't your typical suit and briefcase setup. It was more like a caffeine-powered war room. He had case files stacked taller than my self-restraint and a coffee pot that looked like it had been through more trials than the client's. He flipped through Harold's documents like a kid unwrapping Christmas presents. "Damn, this is airtight. He didn't just leave you assets, he left you leverage. Look at this clause. The patent transfers tied to your original investment shares. It reverts back to you after his death if the company's current leadership is deemed fraudulent." He looked up, smirking. "And you can guess who's currently leadership." I grinned. "Melissa and her discount Ken doll." "Exactly." He tapped the folder. "If we file this correctly, you own everything before they can even fake a new logo. Now, if you've ever been betrayed on both emotional and financial fronts, you know how sweet it feels to have receipts." I'd spent years biting my tongue, watching her parade around as some business icon. giving interviews about female empowerment while stepping on the same guy who built her damn ladder. She took credit for the product, the strategy, the investors, all while calling me the quiet one. But Harold? The old man saw through it. Even in death, he'd managed to pull off the greatest mic drop of corporate karma. Liam grinned, leaning back. You realize this is about to be chaos, right? Once she finds out, she'll go nuclear. Good, I said. I'm tired of her playing the victim. Let's give her a new role, the example. By Friday, we'd filed the claim, registered the transfer, and sent polite notifications to every relevant office. That's lawyer speak for we launched a legal nuke wrapped in a bow. The moment those papers went through, her company's stock froze. Her board of directors started panicking, and I sat on my couch with a beer, watching it all unfold on the news like I'd just tuned into a season finale I helped write. The headline read, Turner Holdings faces legal dispute over patent ownership. Sources say ex-husband may be key beneficiary. Oh, the comments section was pure gold. People were tagging her in posts like it was a scavenger hunt for schadenfreude. Her PR team tried damage control, calling it a misunderstanding. Yeah, misunderstanding. That's what I call stealing intellectual property, gaslighting a marriage, and still thinking you're untouchable. Around midnight, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered, already guessing who it was. Julian. Melissa's voice came through, tight and furious. You think this is funny? Funny? No, I said, sipping my beer. It's hysterical. You should try laughing for real sometime. You had no right. Actually, I cut in. Harold gave me all the rights. Literally. In writing. With witnesses. You want me to send you a copy, or do you prefer learning through headlines? She went quiet for a moment, then hissed. You'll regret this. Already did, I said. It was called marriage. Click. End of call. Sweetest silence I'd ever heard. The next morning, Liam called. She tried to freeze the assets. Let me guess, failed? Like her last attempt at sincerity. Perfect, I said. Then we moved forward. Phase 2. He laughed. You naming your revenge plan again? Not revenge, I said, sipping coffee. Education. We arranged a press statement. Clean, professional, and with just enough bite to make her spin. It said, Julian Reed, original co-founder and silent partner of Turner Holdings, has assumed legal ownership of the company's core patent portfolio following the wishes of late benefactor Harold Stein. Translation, I'm back, and I brought paperwork. By that evening, the internet was split into two camps. Team Melissa, who believed she was the misunderstood genius, and Team Julian, who just wanted justice and maybe a t-shirt line. My inbox flooded with journalists, business analysts, and a few ex-colleagues who suddenly remembered I existed. Then, as if the universe wanted to add seasoning to the meal, a courier arrived at my door with another package, this time from Harold's estate. Inside was a handwritten note and a flash drive. The note read, Julian, if she ever laughs again, play this. I held that little USB like it was a grenade made of truth. I didn't know what was on it yet, but Harold didn't do drama without purpose. I slipped it into my desk drawer. The game was changing, and I was done being the pawn. That night, I sat on my balcony, watching the city lights flicker against the glass buildings, the same skyline Melissa once said she'd conquer. I raised my glass to it, smirking. Well, honey, I muttered, consider it conquered. My phone buzzed again, Liam this time. She's panicking, he said. Her PR's in meltdown. Her board wants answers. They can't spin this anymore. I smiled. Good. Let them stew. I'm just getting started. He chuckled. You know what, Julian? I think Harold would have been proud of this. Nah, I said, finishing my drink. Harold would have called it overdue. I leaned back in my chair, letting the night wind brush past me. For once, I didn't feel like the underdog, or the ex, or the man who lost. I felt even, balanced. The universe had hit, reply all, and justice had copied me in. Sometimes, life doesn't give you a fair ending. But every now and then, if you're patient, if you play it smart, if you let karma drive, it delivers a sequel better than you could have written yourself. And this one? Oh, it was just getting good. There's something about hearing a dead man's voice that makes you question everything. Your sanity, your life choices, even your Wi-Fi connection. Especially when that dead man happens to be Harold Stein, my late mentor, Melissa's rich uncle, and the human embodiment of I told you so. It started 3 days after I found out he'd left me everything. Liam and I were knee-deep in legal chaos, buried in documents, signatures, and 1,000 emails from people who suddenly wanted to reconnect. You know how it is. Go broke, and everyone forgets your number. Get rich again, and they find it faster than the IRS. We were in Harold's old office, the one downtown that still smelled like cigar smoke and old money. It hadn't been touched since his funeral. Dusty bookshelves, heavy drapes, portraits of men who looked like they scolded their children for smiling. The place screamed, legacy with a side of guilt. Liam was rummaging through Harold's filing cabinet, muttering curses about missing paperwork. I was leaning against his mahogany desk, scrolling through my phone, pretending to help. That's when he said it. Julian. His voice had that weird mix of curiosity and, please tell me I'm not about to summon demons. He held up a small silver USB drive, the old kind, scratched, unlabeled, and suspiciously shiny. Where'd you find that? I asked. Behind a drawer, taped to the back panel, he said. Classic Harold move. Man hid things like he thought the CIA was after him. Honestly, given his tax strategies, they probably were. We exchanged a look. That unspoken, this could either make us rich or make us cry look. Liam plugged it into his laptop, the fan immediately whining like it knew drama was coming. A single audio file popped up, for Julian.mp3. I frowned. Not even a password? That's suspiciously friendly. Liam shrugged. Play it. Play it. He clicked. And then, Harold's voice. It was weak, raspy, but still sharp in that way only he could manage. If you're hearing this, Julian, it means the vultures have finally finished circling. I froze. Liam's jaw tightened. Harold coughed into the mic. Melissa and Brandon. Yes, I know. Tried to force me to change my will. Said it was for the good of the company. They brought in some cheap lawyer, made me sign papers I couldn't read because of my eyesight. But I wasn't senile, no matter what those snakes thought. I glanced at Liam. His eyebrows were halfway to his hairline. Harold continued, voice trembling but defiant. I kept the real will hidden. You, Julian, deserve it all. You built what they stole. And if anyone questions it, well, this recording is your insurance policy. Then there was shuffling, papers, footsteps, and then a voice I recognized instantly, even though I wished I didn't. Brandon. Uncle Harold, it's not personal, he said, tone dripping with fake charm. We just need your cooperation. You wouldn't want Melissa to be upset. Harold chuckled bitterly. Son, you couldn't scare a houseplant. Brandon snapped, voice raised. Sign it, old man. And then, Melissa's voice. Cold. Calculated. Just do it, uncle. We'll take care of everything. He doesn't deserve any of it. Silence. Then Harold's strained voice. You'll regret this, Melissa. End of recording. For a moment, the only sound was Liam's laptop fan and my pulse doing backflips. Holy hell, Liam whispered. That's direct evidence. HD sound too. I said, trying to sound calm, but failing miserably. My hands were shaking. They bullied an old man on tape. She and her toy husband. He leaned back, rubbing his temples. Julian, this isn't just civil anymore. This is criminal level stupid. Yeah, I said slowly, staring at the screen. And poetic level satisfying. For years, I'd been painted as the boring one. The quiet one. The guy who couldn't stand up for himself. But now I had something louder than her PR team, more powerful than her connections. The truth, straight from the grave. Liam looked at me, half grinning, half terrified. So what's the move? You planning to nuke them with this? Nah, I said, smirking. I'm going educational. Educational. Yeah, I said. They'll learn today. He burst out laughing. You're insane. I've been called worse, mostly by her. We sat there for a while, staring at the USB like it was Excalibur. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same woman who used Harold's name to humiliate me at investor dinners was now about to be exposed by his voice. She always used to joke, Julian, you're too patient. Yeah, patience is a hell of a teacher. I picked up the drive, turned it over in my fingers. We'll copy it, store it, and lock it down. Multiple backups. Cloud, physical, encrypted, tattoo it on a rock, whatever it takes. Liam nodded. Already on it. By the next morning, we had 5 copies. 1 with Liam, 1 with me, 1 in a bank vault, 1 on a secure drive, and 1 labeled for court because subtlety is overrated. but I couldn't shake the sound of her voice from my head. That cold tone, that entitlement. The same voice that once told me I was lucky she chose me. I'd believed her once. Now I wanted her to hear herself the way Harold did, the way the world soon would. Later that afternoon, Liam called. You should listen to the full recording. There's more. I frowned. There's more? Oh yeah. You stopped it too early. Play it. He sent me the rest, a short, final message Harold had added at the end, one that wasn't in the first playback. Julian, Harold said softly, when the time comes, don't just fight them. Teach them. The best revenge isn't destruction, it's demonstration. Show them what integrity looks like when the lights are on. Then a chuckle. Also, check the red folder in my bottom drawer. You'll need it. Click. End of file. Now, if you've ever gotten advice from a ghost, you know it's hard to ignore. So back I went to his office the next morning. The place was still gloomy, dust dancing in the sunlight like bored spirits. I knelt, opened the bottom drawer, and sure enough, a thick red folder. Inside were signed statements from board members, notarized copies of his real will, and even photos of the fake signing session. Harold had covered every base like a man who'd lived through too many family dinners. I just stood there for a moment, holding that folder, feeling something between grief and vindication. The old man had believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself. I looked up at his portrait on the wall, stern eyes, half smile. You sneaky genius, I whispered. You really planned this. Liam called again. You good? Good, I said, smiling faintly. I'm about to be great. We met again at his office that night, rain tapping against the windows like a drum roll. He spread everything out on the table, the audio file, the documents, the folder. You realize this is a slam dunk, right? Yeah, I said. But I don't want a slam dunk. I want a standing ovation. He chuckled. Then you better rehearse your speech. Oh, I've been rehearsing for 7 years, I said. That night, after we finalized everything, I drove home with the USB in my pocket. I didn't go inside right away. I sat in the car, engine off, staring at the rain streaking down the windshield. You ever feel a mix of triumph and sadness? That's what it was. Victory with a side of loss. Harold had given me the ammo, but also the lesson. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about balance. About finally getting to tell the truth without shouting. About letting her choke on the silence she used to weaponize. I thought back to all the times she laughed at my ideas. The late nights when I stayed up fixing her business proposals while she took credit for them on morning shows. The charity gala where she called me the supportive husband in front of investors, like I was her intern. Every single humiliation, every single eye roll, they all came back now. But this time, they made me smile. Because soon, the world would hear the real story in Harold's own voice. I looked at the USB one last time before putting it away. Rest easy, old man, I said softly. They're about to learn everything you wanted them to. When I finally stepped out of the car, I caught my reflection in the window, calm, confident, older, sharper. Not the quiet man she'd discarded. Not the pushover she'd rewritten in her version of the story. This was me, version 2. Justice. I walked upstairs, plugged in my phone, and typed one message to Liam. Tomorrow we move. Class in session. He replied instantly. Lesson plan ready, Professor. I smiled. Melissa and Brandon had no idea what was coming. And the best part? They were about to hear it from the one man they could never silence, the voice from their past. When people say the truth always comes out, they never tell you how. They make it sound like the truth just floats in one day wearing a cape, announcing, I'm here to fix everything. Spoiler alert, that's not how it works. The truth usually shows up wearing orthopedic shoes, smelling like lavender lotion, and carrying a box of old photos. Her name was Mrs. Harper, Harold Stein's longtime housekeeper. I hadn't seen her since the days when I used to drop off documents at Harold's mansion, and she'd feed me oatmeal cookies that tasted like love and mild judgment. When Harold died, she vanished into retirement somewhere near Clearwater, Florida, where all retired legends go to play bingo and terrify seagulls. But when Liam tracked her down and told her I was handling Harold's estate, she said, Oh, I remember everything, dear. When can I testify? That's how I found myself flying to Florida on a Wednesday afternoon, stuck on a plane beside a guy who ate Funyuns like he was trying to win a contest. I hadn't been to Florida since my honeymoon with Melissa, back when I still thought For Better or Worse had a warranty. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was now heading back to find evidence that could legally vaporize her reputation. Mrs. Harper lived in a cozy bungalow surrounded by flamingo statues and more wind chimes than any neighborhood needed. She opened the door before I could even knock twice, wearing a pastel housecoat and the kind of smile that says she's been waiting to deliver a confession. "Julian Reed," she said, eyes bright behind her glasses. "I was wondering when you'd come." "You were?" I asked, taken aback. "Of course. Harold told me if you ever showed up, I should put on coffee. He said you'd need it." I laughed. Well, he wasn't wrong about that. She waved me inside. The place smelled like cinnamon and nostalgia. Every wall was lined with framed photos. Harold at charity galas, Harold shaking hands with senators, Harold standing next to a 1998 Buick like it was a supermodel. And tucked among them, a few that made my chest tighten. Harold and me at his office years ago, back when I was still the eager intern with a bad haircut and good intentions. Mrs. Harper shuffled toward the kitchen, her slippers squeaking faintly. "Cream and sugar?" "Black's fine," I said. "Ah, strong one. Just like Harold." She poured 2 cups, then sat across from me at the table. "Now, what exactly do you need from an old woman who's seen too much and bites her tongue too little?" I smiled. "Honestly, the truth." She raised an eyebrow. "That's my specialty." I pulled out the USB with Harold's voice recording. "You probably know what this is." Her lips pursed. "Oh, I know all about that day." She took a long sip of coffee. She made him sign the fake papers right there in his study. Her new man was standing behind him like some sort of bouncer. Harold's hands were shaking so badly, I thought he'd spill ink everywhere. I leaned forward. "You were there?" "Front row seat," she said proudly. I told her it wasn't right. She smiled at me. That cold smile rich people use when they think you're furniture. Said I should mind my business. So I did. Meaning, I memorized everything. She got up slowly, disappeared into the hallway, and came back holding a thick, dusty photo album. "Harold's birthday," she said, setting it down. The same day she brought those papers. She claimed they were for a business merger, but Harold looked like someone was forcing him to sign away his dog. She flipped through the pages until she found the photo, grainy but clear enough to make my stomach twist. Harold, pale and weak, sitting at his desk. Melissa standing beside him, red nails clutching a pen, that fake smile plastered on her face. And behind her, Brandon, in all his useless glory, watching like he owned the world. Mrs. Harper tapped the photo. "That's the moment. See her hand? She's holding the paper right over the reel Harold wrote the week before." She switched them while he was distracted. I stared at the photo, trying not to laugh out of sheer disbelief. She really posed for the crime scene. "Oh, honey," Mrs. Harper said, chuckling. She thought she was starring in her own movie. The one where she wins everything and walks off into the sunset. "Bad script," I said. "Terrible ending coming soon." She grinned, revealing a row of surprisingly strong teeth for 82. "You sound just like Harold. He used to say, if you let fools talk long enough, they'll narrate their own downfall." We spent the next hour going through her memories. She remembered everything. The day, the clothes, the smell of Harold's cologne, even the brand of pen Melissa used. "One of those fancy gold ones with her initials on it," she said. "Bought it special for the occasion. Probably thought it made her look powerful." "Yeah," I said. Because nothing screams legitimate like committing fraud with personalized stationery. When she was done, I sat back, feeling a mix of gratitude and rage. "Mrs. Harper, would you be willing to testify?" She didn't hesitate. "I'm 82, son, but for that woman, I'll wear heels." I nearly spit out my coffee. "You're serious?" Serious as heartburn. She made Harold cry that day. I'll never forget that. And nobody makes a good man cry on my watch. Legend. Absolute legend. Before I left, she insisted on packing me cookies for the road and made me promise to call if I needed reinforcement. I told her I might just hire her as my publicist. When I got back to the car, I sat there a minute, holding the photo she gave me. Harold's tired eyes, Melissa's triumphant smirk, Brandon's smug expression. I could practically hear their arrogance through the picture. I snapped a photo of it on my phone and sent it to Liam with one line. "Found our eyewitness. And she's ready to rumble." He replied 2 minutes later. "Tell me she's not senile. She's sharper than both of us combined." Perfect. Then we moved to stage 2. Public humiliation with receipts. By the time I landed back home, Mrs. Harper's testimony had already been drafted, notarized, and filed. Liam was a machine. We've got audio, visuals, and now a witness, he said. At this point, the only thing missing is popcorn. Don't tempt me, I said. I might actually bring some to court. He laughed. You're enjoying this too much. Correction, I said. I'm enjoying justice finally catching up. I'm just giving it directions. The next morning, Melissa's PR team dropped a carefully worded statement. Something about unfounded allegations and distortion of facts by a bitter ex. Classic. I almost admired their commitment to spin. Almost. But I had something better, a grandma with receipts. That afternoon, Liam called, barely containing his amusement. Guess who just tried to reach out to Mrs. Harper? Melissa? Yup. Offered to pay for her silence. Offered to help her with her medical bills. I snorted. She really thought she could bribe an 82-year-old woman who eats moral integrity for breakfast? She didn't just think it. She recorded it. Who did? Mrs. Harper. Apparently, she's been recording her calls since 2007. She said she doesn't trust these modern hussies. Her words, not mine. I was speechless for a second, then started laughing so hard I had to sit down. We're gonna win this thing on nostalgia and sass alone. Mrs. Harper sent us the audio that night. You could hear Melissa's fake kindness dripping through every syllable. Mrs. Harper, darling, I just wanted to make sure you're comfortable. Maybe we could come to a private arrangement. And then Mrs. Harper's reply, smooth as butter. Oh, sweetheart, I don't make arrangements with liars. But I'll save you a front row seat at court. I almost fell off my chair listening to it. The woman was unstoppable. We added that recording to the evidence list. Liam grinned like a kid on Christmas morning. You realize we just turned her whole narrative into confetti, right? Oh, I realize, I said. But let's not rush the parade. I want her to watch it fall. That night, I sat in my living room, the documents spread out before me. The USB, the photos, the witness statement, the call recording. All of it neatly arranged like trophies of poetic justice. I thought about Harold again, his words echoing from that recording. Don't just fight them. Teach them. Yeah, I thought. Lesson plan approved. Sometimes revenge isn't a grand explosion. It's a slow, precise dismantling. Piece by piece. Truth by truth. And tonight, I realized that even the smallest piece, like a photo from an old maid's album, could crack an empire built on lies. Before heading to bed, I texted Mrs. Harper a simple thank you. She responded within 2 minutes. You're welcome, dear. I'll start practicing my courtroom smile. Should I bring cookies? I grinned. Definitely bring cookies. Because when this was all over, I wanted Melissa's downfall to taste just a little bit sweet. You ever get a text so shady it deserves its own thunderclap? That was me, Tuesday night, 8:47 p.m. Scrolling through my phone when her name popped up, Melissa. I hadn't heard from her in months, which meant either she'd found religion or trouble. Spoiler, it wasn't the first one. The message read, let's meet at the lake house. We can end this quietly. Quietly. That word did a full gymnastics routine in my brain. Melissa didn't do quiet. The woman could start drama in a library. When she said quietly, what she really meant was bring your own shovel. I stared at the message for a minute, half laughing, half wondering if she'd finally lost her mind. The lake house, our old getaway spot, now hers, was where we used to spend long weekends pretending to be happy. It's also where I once learned that a broken wine glass travels faster than an apology. But hey, nostalgia's fun. I texted back. Sure. What time? Her reply was instant. 9 tomorrow night. Come alone. Of course. Because that's how every great murder podcast starts. I told Liam about it the next morning. He nearly choked on his coffee. She invited you to the scene of the crime? Yep. Lake house, tomorrow night. She said quietly. Julian, I'm your lawyer and your friend, and both sides of me are screaming don't go. Relax, I said, smirking. I'm not going unarmed. You're bringing a gun? No, I said. A recorder. He groaned. You're insane. Insane's how I survive these people. So the next night, I drove to the lake house, 2 hours of empty highway and bad AM radio. The closer I got, the more memories came back. Melissa dancing barefoot on the dock, her laughter echoing off the water, me thinking she was the love of my life instead of the lesson. Funny how nostalgia feels like food poisoning when you know the ingredients. I pulled into the gravel driveway right on time. The place looked like a perfume commercial. soft lights glowing from the windows, candles flickering inside, and enough roses on the porch to make a funeral jealous. When she opened the door, I almost didn't recognize her. Melissa always looked immaculate, but tonight she was performing immaculate. Designer dress, pearls, that carefully staged innocent wife expression. Behind her, Brandon stood by the fireplace in a suit that probably cost more than his self-respect. "Julian," she said, smiling too wide. "You came." "Of course," I said, walking in. "You said quietly. I had to see what kind of comedy that would be." The air smelled like champagne, expensive perfume, and bad intentions. The table was set for three: candles, silverware, wine. Brandon poured himself a drink like he was auditioning for a commercial called Men Who Don't Pay Taxes. "Let's sit," Melissa said, motioning to the table. I took my seat, directly across from her. The candlelight flickered between us like it knew this was about to get awkward. "So," I said, leaning back, "how's married life? You two look legally entangled." Melissa exhaled through her nose, that fake calm tone slipping. "We don't need to play games, Julian." "Good," I said, "because I brought popcorn." Brandon glared. "Cut the jokes, Reed." "Sorry," I said, shrugging. "They're kind of my coping mechanism for dealing with people who steal things." Melissa rolled her eyes. "This doesn't have to be hostile. You invited me to a candlelit ambush," I said. "Hostility's already on the menu." She forced a laugh, that same laugh she used in court, the one that sounded like guilt in audio form. "Julian, we both know this situation's gotten out of hand. The lawyers, the press, the tension. It's bad for all of us. We can fix this." I leaned forward. "You can't even fix a lie, Melissa. How exactly do you plan to fix a federal offense?" Brandon slammed his glass down. "You're not going to get away with this power trip." I smiled. "Buddy, you married my ex-wife. Power trips are part of the honeymoon package." Melissa's eyes flashed. "I'm trying to be reasonable here." "Then why's your lawyer texting reporters?" She froze. Brandon looked at her like she'd just confessed to tax evasion. Which, honestly, wouldn't surprise me. "Julian," she said, her tone shifting to that manipulative softness I used to fall for. "We can end this quietly. You signed the waiver Liam sent over. Agree not to pursue the company, and we'll compensate you generously." I raised an eyebrow. "Compensate me? You mean, pay me to pretend your fraud didn't happen?" "It's not fraud," she snapped. "It's complicated." "Yeah," I said. "So's surgery, but at least the doctor doesn't steal your organs and call it a misunderstanding." Brandon leaned forward, veins popping in his neck. "Be a man, Julian. Take the deal." I smirked. "Define man, because last I checked, I'm the one who still has a job and a conscience." He stood up, fists clenched. I didn't flinch. I just slowly twirled the pen she'd placed beside the contract, spinning it between my fingers like a baton. "Wow," I said. "You even changed the font." "Helvetica, classy move." Melissa hissed, "Sign it and walk away. You'll still come out rich." "Melissa," I said, leaning forward, my tone calm but surgical, "rich isn't just about money. It's about peace. You traded yours for Instagram followers." Her expression cracked. Brandon muttered something about ungrateful bastards and poured another drink. I clicked the pen, letting the sound echo in the silence. My recorder, tucked in my pocket, was picking up every word. "You really think people will believe you?" she sneered. "You, the quiet ex, the nobody? You'll be laughed out of court." "Maybe," I said, smiling. "But the laughter won't be mine." She frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" "You'll find out," I said. About 30 seconds after the judge presses play, her face paled. "You have nothing." "Oh, I have everything," I said. "And the best part? You gave me most of it." For a moment, the only sound was the ticking of the clock and Brandon's nervous sip of whiskey. Melissa's hands trembled slightly, just enough for me to notice. She wasn't used to losing control. She thrived on it. Tonight, she was choking on it. She stood abruptly, trying to regain composure. "Fine. If you want to go down this path, so be it. But don't expect me to hold back." "Sweetheart," I said, standing too. "You've been holding back the truth for years. It's about time you let something honest out." Brandon muttered, "You're gonna regret this." "Funny," I said, smiling. "That's what your accountant said before the audit." Melissa gasped. "What audit?" "Oh, come on. You think Liam didn't dig? You've been moving funds from Harold's Trust through dummy accounts in Turner Holdings for years. But don't worry. I'm sure the prosecutor will understand. Her face drained of color. You wouldn't. Wouldn't I? You stole from your dying uncle. I'm just returning the favor, interest included. For a second, I thought she might actually throw her wine glass at me again. Old habits die hard. But instead, she grabbed the contract, tore it in half, and hissed, "You'll burn for this." "Maybe," I said, walking toward the door, "but at least I'll burn clean." As I reached for the handle, Brandon called out, "You think this recording means anything? You'll never prove it was real." I turned back, grinning. Who said I only had one? And with that, I left. The cool night air hit me like a baptism. I walked to my car, heart pounding, not from fear, but from the thrill of knowing the trap had closed. I pulled out my phone, checked the recorder. Everything was there. Her offer, his threats, her panic. Crisp audio. The kind of evidence that makes prosecutors salivate. As I started the engine, I caught one last glimpse of the lake house in the rearview mirror, the candles flickering, the windows glowing. It looked peaceful from the outside, but inside, that was the sound of empires cracking. Halfway down the road, my phone buzzed. Text from Liam. "You alive?" "Barely. Got everything on tape." "Good. Send it over." Also, she tried to bribe me with champagne and Helvetica. Huh. Classic Melissa. "See you tomorrow." I smiled, rolling down the window. The night air tasted like vindication. When I got home, I played the recording again, this time on my laptop. Hearing her voice beg and manipulate, it was almost nostalgic. Almost. I saved the file in 3 locations and sent copies to Liam with the subject line, "Dinner served cold." Then I poured myself a drink. Whiskey, 2 cubes, no regrets, and toasted to Harold, wherever he was. "Hope you're watching, old man," I said quietly. "She's finally learning." And for the first time in years, I laughed. A real one, not the bitter kind. Because this time, I wasn't laughing at my pain. I was laughing at the ending she'd written for herself. Dinner was over. And the main course? Justice. If there's one thing I've learned about powerful idiots, it's that they always assume loyalty can be rented. They think everything has a price: integrity, silence, friendship, even memory. That lesson got reinforced the next morning when my phone lit up with the kind of call you only get when someone's backed into a corner. I was mid-sip on my second cup of coffee, halfway through reading an article titled, "How to Avoid Your Ex in a City of 8 Million People," when Liam called. His voice had that tone, the one he used when he was equal parts disgusted and entertained. "Julian," he said, "you're going to want to hear this." Now, when a lawyer says that before 9 a.m., it's never good news. "Please tell me she didn't file another motion," I groaned. "Oh, she filed something," he said. "It's called desperation. Talk to me." "Brandon called me. That woke me up faster than caffeine ever could." "He called you?" "Yup. Offered me 200 grand to drop the case. Said it's for the family's reputation." I almost spit out my coffee. 200 grand? What? Does he think he's in a Netflix political drama? "Oh, it gets better," Liam said, laughing. He left it on voicemail. Full confession. I recorded the call back, too. I leaned back in my chair, grinning. "You're kidding. I'm a lawyer, not a magician. I don't joke with gold like this." "Send it." A minute later, my phone buzzed with the file. I hit play, and there it was. Brandon's voice, nervous but trying to sound confident, like a used car salesman pitching morality. "Hey, Liam," he began. "Look, we both know how messy this is getting. Melissa's emotional, and Julian's being stubborn. Nobody wants this circus in public. So, what if we make it worth your while? Say 200,000. You drop the case, everyone moves on. You can even tell your client it was a dead end." There was a pause. I could hear Liam's faint chuckle in the recording. Then he said, "You do realize you just tried to bribe an attorney, right?" Brandon stammered. No, it's not a bribe. It's an incentive for discretion." Liam replied smoothly, "Good. Because it's about to trend on Twitter." Click. End of call. I couldn't stop laughing. Not the polite kind, the unhinged kind that makes neighbors check if you're okay. He actually said incentive for discretion? My God, this man's thesaurus should be burned. Liam called back, chuckling. "We're sending this to the prosecutor today. This case just went from civil to criminal faster than Brandon's brain cell count." "Who's on the prosecution?" "Dana Ellis," he said. "You remember her? The assistant district attorney who made that oil exec cry on live television." "Oh yeah," I said, grinning. The woman who could slice lies in half just by blinking. That's the one. She's been waiting for a case like this. Well, congratulations to her, I said. She's about to get front row seats to the Melissa and Brandon meltdown tour. By noon, Liam had already forwarded everything to Dana's office. She called me directly that afternoon. Her voice was smooth but carried that edge of someone who'd seen too many rich people try to wiggle out of accountability. Mr. Reed, she said, I've reviewed the preliminary documents. The evidence is substantial. That's legal code for holy crap, right? She laughed softly. Something like that. We're filing formal charges for attempted bribery and obstruction. Music to my ears. And Mr. Reed, she added, for what it's worth, you handled this well. Most people would have reacted emotionally. You kept it clean. I smiled. I've had practice pretending to stay calm while being married to the problem. She chuckled. I'll be in touch when we set the pre-trial schedule. After we hung up, I sat there for a while, staring at my phone. This wasn't just revenge anymore. This was justice tightening its seatbelt. For years, I'd been made to feel like the fool, like the naive guy who didn't know how the world worked. But now, the same people who laughed at me were the punchline. Around 4, Liam stopped by my apartment. He tossed his briefcase on the couch and handed me a beer. You're officially the star witness in the dumbest bribery attempt I've ever seen. Cheers to that, I said, clinking bottles. He sat down, sighing. They're unraveling, man. Melissa's PR team tried to spin the story, said the audio was deep-faked. I snorted. Of course, because when you're caught lying, the best move is to invent new technology. Dana already verified it. Timestamp, voice match, everything. Beautiful. He took a long drink, then grinned. You know what the best part is? What? She called me this morning. Melissa? Yup. Said she wanted to clarify the situation. I told her she could clarify it in court. She must be panicking, I said, smirking. Oh, she is. Her husband's under investigation, her company's frozen, and her old maid's got better PR than she does. The woman's basically one yoga retreat away from a nervous breakdown. We laughed for a while, the kind of laughter that tastes like relief. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was reacting, I was leading. I wasn't the quiet husband cleaning up after the storm. I was the storm. Later that evening, my phone buzzed again, unknown number. Normally I'd ignore it, but I had a gut feeling. I answered. Juliet. The voice was hoarse, frantic. Melissa. I leaned back in my chair, calm as ever. Afternoon, Mrs. Turner. Or is it Mrs. Panic now? Don't do this, she said quickly. You're ruining both our lives. Oh, sweetheart, I said, smiling. You ruined yours. I'm just reading the fine print. This isn't you, she pleaded. You're not cruel. I chuckled. Funny, that's what Harold said right before you forged his will. Silence. Then, you think you're the hero here. No, I said. I'm the reminder. What does that mean? It means you spent years pretending consequences didn't exist. I'm just reintroducing you to. She inhaled sharply, trying to stay composed. We can still make this go away. Name your price. See, that's your problem, I said. You keep mistaking my principles for a negotiation. Julian, please. No, I cut in, voice firm. Save it for the deposition. And bring your husband. I think the prosecutor wants to hear his incentive for discretion speech again. I hung up before she could respond. For a moment, I just sat there, the silence around me thick and satisfying. She'd finally run out of manipulation, out of smirks, out of ways to twist the narrative. The Queen of Control had lost her script. The next morning, Dana called again. Mr. Reed, just confirming, the bribery case has been added to the larger fraud file. We'll be moving quickly. My office appreciates your cooperation. Happy to help, I said. You might want to bring popcorn to court. It's going to be cinematic. She laughed. Trust me, I'm already reserving a seat. When I hung up, I realized something. I wasn't angry anymore. The bitterness that had fueled me for years had turned into something quieter. Focus. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it hums while sipping coffee. I spent the rest of the day going through files, cleaning up the last details for Liam. He dropped by later with a smug grin. Guess who just called me again? I sighed. Brandon. Bingo. This time he offered 300 grand. I laughed. Inflation's a killer, huh? Yup. And he started the call with, this isn't a bribe, it's an opportunity. I nearly fell out of my chair. Please tell me you recorded that too. Of course I did. It's practically a hobby now. We both cracked up. Then, as his laughter died down, he looked at me more seriously. You know, you could have gone the easy route. Sold your silence. Walked away rich. Yeah, I said quietly. But then I'd still be her kind of rich. Empty. He nodded slowly. You really have changed, man. Maybe, I said. Or maybe I just finally stopped being polite about my piece. That night, I sat on my balcony again, city lights flickering in the distance. I thought about Harold, about his voice on that recording, about the lesson he'd left me. Don't just fight them. Teach them. And for once, I understood it completely. This wasn't about payback anymore. It was about closure, the kind that doesn't need applause, just quiet certainty. I raised my glass to the skyline. Here's to Karma, I said softly. She's slow, but she's thorough. Then I smiled, a real one. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for the next storm. I was the calm after it. If you've never had your ex-wife call you irrelevant on national television, let me save you the experience. It's both infuriating and free PR. The day after the bribery news broke, Melissa decided to do what all narcissists do when cornered, go public and perform. And when I say perform, I mean she practically rolled out a red carpet for her own delusion. I woke up that morning to my phone vibrating like it was having a panic attack. Notifications, texts, tags, all from friends sending me links. There she was on Good Morning Metro, dressed in soft pastel tones like an innocent garden fairy caught in a misunderstanding. The cheerin' under her read. Melissa Turner speaks out, betrayed by a bitter ex. I poured my coffee and turned up the volume. The host, some guy with perfectly symmetrical teeth, leaned in like he was about to uncover a lost treasure. Melissa, there are reports of fraud, bribery, and evidence manipulation tied to your company. What do you have to say? She smiled that rehearsed smile I used to see before every argument that somehow ended with me apologizing for existing. Honestly, Greg, it breaks my heart. Julian was once my partner, but he's become obsessed. He's trying to destroy what we built together because he can't handle that I moved on. I actually laughed out loud, loud enough for my neighbor to bang on the wall. Obsessed? Lady, the only thing I'm obsessed with is watching you lose Wi-Fi during your lies. She continued, blinking with fake vulnerability. He's been spreading misinformation to ruin my reputation. I truly wish him peace. Ah yes, the holy trinity of fake victimhood, tears, denial, and unsolicited blessings. Classic Melissa. I texted Liam immediately. She's on TV calling me bitter again. He replied within 10 seconds. She's trending. Hashtag MelissaGate. Is that a thing? Now it is. The internet loves karma. The next few days turned into a PR battlefield. Her camp pushed glossy statements about female entrepreneurship under attack. Mine? We went with facts. Not nearly as shiny, but way more lethal. Liam released a quiet press note. All evidence regarding Turner Holdings fraud. Let me guess, they're saying it's AI generated? Bingo. Deepfake defense. I groaned. This woman couldn't pass a lie detector, but she's suddenly an expert in synthetic media? Yup, Liam said, sighing. It's a circus, man. Reporters, bloggers, legal analysts. Everyone wants a piece. Hence the title. The courthouse steps looked like a film premiere the morning of the pretrial hearing. Cameras everywhere. People holding microphones like spears. One reporter even shouted, Julian, did you bribe the prosecutor to get this far? I gave him a grin and said, Nah, I'm just good at making honest people like me. Liam whispered as we walked inside. You love this too much. Can you blame me? I said. 7 years of silence, and I finally get the mic. Inside, Melissa was already there. She looked like she'd been dipped in gold leaf. Perfect hair, pearls, even a white suit. White. As in, look at me, I'm purity personified. Brandon sat beside her, stiff and uncomfortable, probably rehearsing which amendments he was about to violate. Her lawyer, the ever-slimy Mr. Pratt, stood and began his dramatic speech. Your Honor, the so-called evidence presented by Mr. Reed's counsel cannot be authenticated. Audio technology today is advanced, and anyone can fabricate a recording. The judge leaned forward, unimpressed. So your argument is technology is scary? I had to bite my cheek not to laugh. Liam stood, buttoning his jacket. Your Honor, we anticipated this claim. The audio has been forensically verified by 3 independent labs. The timestamps match the phone records. Unless opposing counsel believes aliens made the call, we rest on evidence. The courtroom snickered. Even the stenographer paused for a second. Melissa whispered something to her lawyer, glaring at me. I smiled politely. That's the thing about truth. It doesn't shout. It just waits for the lies to collapse. After the hearing, reporters swarmed outside like vultures at a buffet. One shouted, "Mr. Reed, any comment on being called bitter?" I stopped, turned to face the cameras, and said, "If wanting fairness is bitter, then I guess I'm artisanal dark chocolate." The soundbite went viral. Even Dana, the prosecutor, texted me later, "You're good at this. Don't steal my job." By then, Melissa's empire was cracking. Her investors started pulling out faster than gym memberships in February. The board issued a statement distancing themselves from ongoing legal controversies. Translation: we'd rather not drown with her. One of her old friends even sold her out to a gossip blog, confirming she'd been stressed, erratic, and convinced Julian hired hackers. I didn't, though I briefly considered sending her a fake invoice for emotional labor. Then came the tabloids. They labeled the entire ordeal the Turner takedown. Covers read things like love, lies, and lawsuits, and ex-husband outsmarts corporate queen. Normally, I'd hate the attention, but honestly, watching her scramble to control the story was better than Netflix. A week before the official trial date, I found myself in my office, surrounded by folders, statements, and about 12 cups of coffee. Liam was on the couch, half asleep under a pile of paperwork. "You know," he muttered, "you could have just moved on." I looked up from my desk. "And deprive the public of this masterpiece? No way." He chuckled. "You've gone full petty philosopher. Hey, pettiness with purpose is just strategy in heels." We laughed, but underneath it, I felt something else: peace. The kind that doesn't need validation, just closure. I wasn't chasing revenge anymore. I was defending dignity. Mine, Harold's, even the truth's. A few days later, another text from Melissa came through, longer this time, clearly written during one of her late-night panic spirals. "I know you think you've won, but this will destroy both of us. You can't fix pain by inflicting it. Stop before it's too late." I read it twice, then replied. Too late was 7 years ago. This is just me turning the lights back on. I didn't hear from her again after that. The final week before trial felt weirdly calm. The chaos was still there, the media, the hashtags, the gossip, but inside me, stillness. Like I'd already made peace with whatever came next. The morning before the trial, I stopped by Harold's grave. It was quiet, no reporters, no noise. I placed a single white rose on his headstone and said, "You were right, old man." They taught themselves the hard way. Then I added, smirking, "And don't worry, I kept it classy." When I got back to the city, Liam texted, "Everything's set for tomorrow. The DA's ready. We're walking in with confidence and caffeine." I texted back, "Good. Because tomorrow, the circus ends." But deep down, I already knew it wasn't just their circus. It was mine too. I'd been part of it once, smiling on command, clapping for the illusion. The difference now was that I finally knew where the exits were. As I shut my phone and leaned back in my chair, I laughed softly to myself. The world could call it petty. They could call it dramatic. But me? I called it closure, in 4K, with surround sound. Tomorrow wasn't just the trial. It was the encore. Courtrooms have this weird smell, part coffee, part paper, and part panic. It's like justice has a scent, and it's nervous. The morning of the trial, I walked through those courthouse doors feeling like I was entering a movie I'd already seen a dozen times. Only this time, I wasn't the extra in the background. I was the main event. The place was buzzing. Reporters, cameras, whispers, all that cinematic chaos that makes lawyers secretly love their jobs. My story had turned into a public spectacle, Turner versus Reed, or as Twitter called it, X-Wars, the final hearing. People were lined up outside like they were waiting for concert tickets. You'd think Taylor Swift was testifying. When I entered the courtroom, heads turned. Not in that, "Oh no, it's the defendant" way, but in that, "Wait, that's him." The calm guy who torched a scandal way. I was wearing a charcoal suit, no tie, simple watch, confidence in fabric form. Liam leaned over and whispered, "You ready?" I smirked. I've been ready since she laughed in my face 7 years ago. Melissa was already seated at the plaintiff's table, front row, pearls glistening like gilt dressed as class. Brandon sat behind her, looking like a man who accidentally bought a one-way ticket to Regretville. Her lawyer, Pratt, had that cocky grin lawyers wear right before losing. Judge Harris entered, an older man with tired eyes and the face of someone who'd seen too many divorces and not enough therapy. Court is now in session, he announced. The gavel hit the wood, echoing like thunder over fragile egos. Dana Ellis, the prosecutor, sat across from Liam. Sharp suit, sharper tone. If confidence could be bottled, hers would be labeled premium-grade justice. The first hour was dull, procedural stuff, objections, evidence admissions. You know, the appetizer before the chaos. Then Pratt stood up and started his performance. Your Honor, he said dramatically, the defense's entire case rests on fabricated materials. My client has been vilified by the media, betrayed by former associates, and smeared by a bitter ex-husband who cannot accept her success. Melissa did this thing where she lowered her eyes and nodded like a saint forgiving sinners. Classic move. The jury looked mildly sympathetic for about 10 seconds. Dana stood next. Your Honor, the evidence will show that Mrs. Turner and her husband knowingly falsified documents, coerced a dying man, and attempted to bribe counsel representing the rightful heir to Harold Stein's estate. Cue the gasps. Even the stenographer paused mid-typing. Pratt scoffed. Bribe? That's ridiculous. Dana didn't even blink. We have recordings, Mr. Pratt. Multiple. Would you like to hear them, or keep pretending? The judge sighed. Proceed. The first audio clip played. Brandon's voice filled the room. We just want to protect the family name. 200,000 should cover discretion. Every head turned toward Melissa and Brandon. He froze, his jaw tight. She whispered something at him. Probably. You idiot. Then Dana queued up the next one, Harold's voice. The one from the USB. That shaky, weary tone of a man betrayed. Melissa and Brandon forced me to change my will. But I kept the real one. Julian deserves it all. The courtroom went silent. You could feel the air shift. Like everyone just realized the villain wasn't the one they were told it was. Melissa shot to her feet. That's fake, she shouted. You can't prove that's real. Judge Harris raised an eyebrow. Mrs. Turner, sit down. She pointed a trembling finger at me. He's manipulating everyone. He's been obsessed with me for years. I tilted my head. Obsessed is a strong word. I'd go with mildly entertained by your downfall. The courtroom chuckled. Even the judge smirked before clearing his throat. Mr. Reed, please refrain from. Yes, Your Honor, I said innocently. Refraining now. Liam leaned over and whispered, You're enjoying this too much. Buddy, I whispered back, this is my Super Bowl. The next evidence drop hit harder, photos from Mrs. Harper's album. Melissa, pen in hand, Harold looking frail beside her, Brandon lurking in the background. Dana narrated each image like a museum guide of fraud. Here we have the defendants staging a false signing while the witness, Mrs. Harper, was present and later threatened into silence. Melissa slammed her hands on the table. She's lying. Dana smiled sweetly. Then she must have lied to the recording device too, because she captured your call offering her medical assistance for cooperation. At that, Brandon groaned, running a hand down his face. I couldn't resist. I leaned toward Liam. You think he's wishing he'd taken that bartending job now? Pratt tried to regain control. Your Honor, my clients are victims of manipulation. By who? The judge asked flatly. He hesitated. By Mr. Reed. The judge blinked slowly. So the man who provided the real evidence manipulated the ones who forged a will and bribed an attorney? Pratt stammered. In a manner of speaking. Try speaking better, the judge said dryly. The courtroom laughed. The sound of justice, sweet and sarcastic. Dana wasn't done. She pulled out Harold's handwritten letter, the one Liam had kept locked in the vault. This, Your Honor, is Harold Stein's final statement, notarized and witnessed independently. She began to read. If Julian stands before this court, he already carries more honesty than the rest of them combined. Melissa's face drained of color. Her lawyer looked like he wanted to melt into the carpet. The judge leaned back, exhaled slowly, and muttered, This isn't civil, this is criminal. Boom. Mic drop, if microphones were allowed in court. Melissa's voice cracked. You don't understand? He used me. He tricked me into thinking. I interrupted, calm as ever. Into thinking what? That you could steal everything and still come out as the victim? You didn't need help with that. You've always been a natural. Her eyes blazed. You ruined me. Correction, I said. You did. I just brought the mirror. The judge banged the gavel. Enough. Mrs. Turner, control yourself, or I'll have you removed. She collapsed into her chair, tears starting to form. Not remorseful tears, performative ones. The kind that say, please sympathize with my downfall. Brandon looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. When the judge called for recess, he stood and muttered to her. We're screwed. She hissed back, not if I spin it right. I smiled as I passed them. Good luck with that. Maybe Netflix will pick it up. Outside the courtroom, the hallway was chaos. Cameras flashing, microphones everywhere, reporters shouting questions. One asked, Mr. Reed, how do you feel after hearing those tapes in court? I grinned. Like honesty, just got a sequel. Back inside, round 2 started after lunch. Dana called Mrs. Harper to the stand. The woman walked in wearing her Sunday best and the confidence of a saint who knows she's about to deliver divine punishment. Mrs. Harper, Dana began. Do you recognize the people in this photo? Of course, she said proudly. That's Harold, that's Melissa, and that's the other one. What's his name again? Brandon Turner, Dana supplied. Right, Brandon. I remember him because he smelled like cheap cologne and bad credit. The courtroom exploded with laughter. The judge coughed into his hand to hide a smile. Melissa's lawyer objected. Your Honor, relevance? The judge waved him off. Overruled. The witness can continue. And please, Mrs. Harper, proceed carefully but honestly. I always do, she said sweetly. Unlike some people. Her testimony sealed it. Every detail matched the photos, the recordings, everything. By the time she stepped down, you could see the jury wasn't just convinced. They were offended on my behalf. When closing arguments rolled around, Dana didn't need theatrics. This isn't about divorce, she said. It's about deception. About people who thought wealth made them untouchable, and a man who refused to let truth stay buried. Then she turned toward me and nodded once. Thank you, Mr. Reed. The judge's final words before adjourning for the verdict were simple but heavy. If half of what we've seen today doesn't shock you, then you've stopped paying attention. As the gavel came down, Melissa's composure shattered completely. She shouted something incoherent, half anger, half panic. The bailiff had to step forward, not to restrain her, but to protect the dignity of the meltdown. Brandon just sat there, silent, face in his hands. For once, he understood what rock bottom sounded like, and it came in Dolby Surround. When the session ended, I stood up, adjusted my jacket, and looked over at her. She met my eyes with pure hatred, and I gave her the calmest smile I've ever managed in my life. That, I said softly, was for Harold, and I walked out, leaving the circus behind. Verdict, guilty. Fraud, forgery, obstruction, the trifecta of poetic justice. The courtroom went silent, then erupted into whispers, cameras clicking like applause. Melissa sat frozen, mascara running an Olympic marathon down her cheeks. Brandon just stared at the floor like maybe it'd open up and swallow him. Mercifully, it didn't. The judge looked at me and said, Mr. Reed, your uncle would be proud. I nodded, smiling just enough to be polite. Inside, though, it felt like exhaling after holding my breath for 7 years. All assets restored, patents reverted, the house, mine again. Reporters shouted questions as I walked out, but I just kept moving. For once, I didn't need to explain anything. The truth had done all the talking for me. Melissa whispered as I passed, You won. I leaned close and said, No, we did. You taught me how. Then I left her there, in pearls, shame, and silence. 1 year later, peace didn't come like a sunrise. It came like a refund, quiet, satisfying, and way overdue. I'd opened the Reed Institute for Legal Integrity downtown, a fancy way of saying, a place where people learn not to become their own scandals. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was now teaching others how not to do exactly what Melissa did. Underestimate patience, misplace honesty, and overestimate their own cleverness. Reporters still tried to frame me as the man who turned revenge into philanthropy. I preferred my version. The guy who got tired of stupid people winning. When one journalist asked if I did it for revenge, I laughed. No, I told her, revenge yells. Justice hums while sipping coffee. The lake house eventually became mine again. I didn't sell it. I kept it, like a trophy and a warning label in one. Sometimes I drive out there, sit by the dock with a beer, and listen to the quiet. The same water that once echoed her laughter now mirrored peace instead of pretense. Do I forgive her? Maybe. Do I miss her? Only when my Wi-Fi lags. That's how I know hell is real. Brandon took a plea deal. Melissa? She got community service and a lifetime subscription to Regret. I heard she tried to start another business under a new name. Didn't work. Turns out, the internet has a long memory. As for me, I'm doing just fine. Better, actually. My mornings are quiet, my coffee stays hot, and my name, finally, means something good again. People greet me with respect instead of pity. Even the barista down the street writes Mr. Reed on my cup now. Sometimes, when I'm locking up the office at night, I catch myself laughing softly, not the bitter laugh I used to carry like armor, but a lighter one. The kind that says, you made it out. Last week, I drove back to the lake house again. Same dock, same view, different man. I tossed a coin into the water, not for luck, just to remind myself that I paid my dues and got change back. As it sank, I said, that's for Harold. The wind was calm. The ripples faded. And for the first time, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt earned. At my wife's office branch opening party, her boss mocked in front of everyone me not knowing I owned the company. You know that feeling when your spouse says, oh, it's just a small office thing, you don't have to come, and every single alarm bell in your head starts ringing like you're in a 5-alarm fire drill? Yeah, that was my first red flag. And let me tell you, I've got a PhD in reading between the lines when it comes to my wife's tone. Tessa, my beautiful, ambitious, occasionally too honest for her own good wife, had been acting weird for about 3 weeks now, and not the fun kind of weird where she suddenly decides we should learn salsa dancing or adopt a rescue guinea pig. No, this was corporate weird, the kind that makes you wonder if she's been replaced by a motivational speaker who exclusively communicates in LinkedIn buzzwords. Suddenly, everything coming out of her mouth was brand image, branch performance, and my personal favorite, team culture, which is just corporate speak for we're all pretending to like each other while secretly competing for the same promotion. She'd come home from work looking exhausted but weirdly energized, like she'd just finished running a marathon through a motivational poster factory. Her laptop was always open, her phone was always buzzing, and whenever I asked what was going on, she'd wave me off with some vague explanation about quarterly reviews and strategic initiatives that made my eyes glaze over faster than a Krispy Kreme conveyor belt. So when I casually overheard her on the phone, okay, fine, I was totally eavesdropping while pretending to look for my favorite coffee mug in the kitchen, mentioning that her boss Gregory was hosting this massive grand opening gala for the new downtown branch, complete with crystal chandeliers, a live band, and apparently enough champagne to baptize a yacht. My curiosity went from 0 to Nancy Drew real quick. The kicker? She specifically told her friend on the phone that spouses weren't really expected to attend because it was more of a professional networking thing. Translation, I don't want my husband there, and I'm not entirely sure why, which should probably concern both of us. Now, here's the thing about me and red flags. Most people see them and think, maybe I should proceed with caution and have a mature conversation about my feelings. Me? I see a red flag and immediately think, challenge accepted. Let's turn this into a social experiment. Because apparently I never learned that curiosity killed the cat. Or maybe I just figured I've got 8 lives left, and I'm feeling lucky. So I made an executive decision right there in my kitchen, still holding that stupid coffee mug I'd been looking for, as an excuse to lurk near her phone conversation. I was going to crash this party like a YouTube prankster with a trust fund and nothing to lose. My assistant, Liam, God bless him, he's like a millennial version of Alfred from Batman if Alfred wore skinny jeans and had opinions about oat milk. Caught wind of my plan the next morning when I casually mentioned I'd need the evening free on Friday. Liam's one of those people who's so organized that he color codes his color coding system. So naturally, his first instinct was to reach for his tablet and start typing up a formal RSVP like we were attending a royal wedding instead of what was essentially my wife's office party on steroids. Sir, I can send over your details to the event coordinator, he said, his fingers already hovering over the keyboard with the enthusiasm of someone who genuinely enjoys administrative tasks. We should probably confirm dietary restrictions, parking arrangements, and whether you need a +1 registered in the system. I looked at him with what I hoped was a mixture of paternal wisdom and barely contained mischief. "No need, Liam," I said, watching his face do that thing where he tries to hide his concern but fails miserably because his eyebrows betray him every single time. "Let's make it a surprise. Nothing says romance like public confusion and the faint possibility of security escorting me out." I could see him calculating the probability of disaster in his head, running through scenarios like he was preparing for a TED Talk on how my boss's terrible decisions became learning opportunities. But to his credit, he just sighed, closed his tablet, and muttered something about updating my liability insurance, which I chose to interpret as enthusiastic support. The thing is, I wasn't just doing this because I missed Tessa, although I absolutely did miss her. 3 weeks of her coming home late and being weirdly distant had left me eating dinner alone more times than I cared to admit. And there's only so many nights a man can have a deep conversation with his microwave before he starts questioning his life choices. No, I was doing this primarily because curiosity has always been, and will forever be my favorite form of chaos. Some people skydive, some people buy sports cars they can't afford, and me? I show up uninvited to corporate events just to see what happens when you throw a wrench into a perfectly planned machine. It's like performance art, except the canvas is social anxiety and the paint is my complete disregard for conventional boundaries. As I stood in my closet Friday evening, picking out what to wear to an event I technically wasn't invited to, I felt that familiar buzz of excitement mixed with the slight possibility that this could backfire spectacularly. I settled on a charcoal gray suit. Not too flashy, not too casual, the kind of outfit that says, I could either be a guest or someone who's about to serve you documents, and you won't know which until it's too late. Tessa had already left an hour earlier, claiming she needed to get there early to help with setup, which I found suspicious considering she'd never voluntarily arrived early to anything in her entire life, including our wedding, but I digress. I checked myself in the mirror one last time, adjusted my tie, and couldn't help but smile at my own reflection like a villain in a movie who's about to monologue about his master plan. "Marcus," I said to myself, because talking to your reflection is totally normal and not at all a sign that you should reconsider your evening plans. You're either about to have the best night of your life or you're about to become a cautionary tale that Liam tells at parties. Either way, it's going to be interesting. I grabbed my keys, sent Liam a text that just said, "Wish me luck," to which he immediately responded with a gif of a dumpster fire and 3 concerned emojis, and headed out the door. The drive downtown gave me way too much time to think about what I was actually doing and whether this qualified as healthy relationship behavior or if I was crossing some line that would eventually require couples therapy and a lot of apologetic flowers. But here's the thing about gut feelings. Sometimes they're indigestion from that sketchy food truck you insisted was authentic, and sometimes they're your subconscious screaming that something's off and you need to pay attention. And my gut was currently performing an entire Broadway musical about how something was definitely, absolutely, 100% not right with this whole situation. As I pulled into the parking garage near the venue, watching all these dressed up people streaming toward the building like ants heading to a very expensive picnic, I felt that last little whisper of doubt try to talk me out of this. "You could just turn around," it said. "You could go home, order pizza, watch that documentary about weird crimes, and pretend you never had this idea." But I've never been good at listening to the reasonable voice in my head, mostly because the unreasonable voice is so much more entertaining and has a better playlist. So I got out of the car, straightened my jacket, and walked toward the building with the confidence of someone who absolutely belonged there, even though we both knew, me and that fancy building, that I absolutely, definitely, spectacularly did not. The night air was crisp, the kind that makes you feel alive and slightly reckless. And as I approached the entrance where a bored-looking guy with a clipboard was checking names, I realized I hadn't actually planned how I was going to get past the velvet rope of corporate exclusivity. But sometimes, I've learned, the best plans are no plans at all, just pure momentum and the unwavering belief that if you walk like you own the place, people assume you do. So that's exactly what I did. I walked right up to that entrance like I'd personally funded the entire event, which, in a twist of irony that would become apparent very soon, wasn't actually that far from the truth. The event was pure pretentious glitter, the kind of setup that screams, "We have money and we need everyone to know it," without actually saying it out loud, because that would be tacky, and God forbid corporate America ever admits to being tacky while literally draping everything in gold fabric. Crystal lights hung from the ceiling like frozen fireworks, catching the light and throwing it around the room in a way that probably cost more than most people's cars. The appetizers looked like they'd been designed by architects rather than chefs. Tiny, geometric, and way too beautiful to actually eat, which I'm pretty sure was the point, because if people are too intimidated to touch the food, you save money on catering. And everywhere I looked, people were standing in those weird corporate clusters, holding champagne flutes like they were props in a stage play about success, laughing at jokes that probably weren't funny but had been told by someone important enough that laughing was basically a career move. The moment I walked in, and I mean the exact microsecond my shoes hit that polished marble floor, I could feel the atmosphere drop 2 degrees, maybe 3 if we're being generous with the metaphor. You know that feeling when you walk into a room and suddenly realize everyone's dress code memo went to their inbox, but somehow skipped yours? Except in this case, it wasn't about the clothes. It was about my entire existence being an unexpected variable in their carefully calculated evening. Eyes swiveled toward me like I was a glitch in the Matrix, a pop-up ad that appeared in the middle of their premium, ad-free experience. You'd think I had walked in wearing flip-flops, board shorts, and a free Wi-Fi t-shirt with mysterious stains, not a perfectly acceptable charcoal suit that probably cost more than half the outfits in this room. But hey, perception is everything when you're the uninvited guest at the corporate ball. I spotted Tessa across the room almost immediately because my wife has this way of standing that's uniquely hers, shoulders back, chin up, like she's perpetually ready to either accept an award or fight someone, depending on the situation. She was talking to a group of colleagues, her laugh a little too loud, a little too performed, and I felt that pang of something I couldn't quite name. Was it jealousy? Concern? Indigestion from the sketchy gas station coffee I'd grabbed on the way? The jury was still out. But before I could make my way over to her, I got intercepted by the man himself, the legend, the myth, the reason I was crashing this party in the first place. Tessa's boss, Gregory, spotted me from across the room with the kind of radar that only middle management develops after years of monitoring employee bathroom breaks and tracking who leaves at exactly 5 o'clock. He made his way toward me with that power walk that guys like him perfect in front of mirrors, probably while listening to motivational podcasts about alpha males and disrupting industries. His smile was what I can only describe as aggressively friendly, the kind that doesn't quite reach the eyes because the eyes are too busy calculating whether you're useful or irrelevant. "Oh, you must be Tessa's husband," he said, extending a hand that gripped mine with just a little too much pressure, like he was trying to assert dominance through handshake PSI alone. I smiled back, matching his energy with the kind of pleasant neutrality that drives aggressive personalities absolutely insane. "That's me," I said. "Guilty as charged, Your Honor." He laughed at that like I'd said something clever, which I hadn't. But I learned a long time ago that powerful people are so used to others laughing at their jokes that they assume everyone else's comments are equally hilarious. "You're the handyman, right?" he asked. And there it was, that casual condescension wrapped in a question mark, the verbal equivalent of patting someone on the head while standing on a stepladder. Now, I could have corrected him right there, could have dropped the bomb that would have made his smile crack like cheap china. But where's the fun in revealing your hand before you've even seen the flop? So instead, I went with misdirection, my favorite magic trick. "Only on weekends," I replied, keeping my tone light and breezy like we were discussing the weather instead of him casually insulting my career. During weekdays, I build other people's futures. I watched his face do that thing where the brain tries to process whether what I just said was profound or pretentious, ultimately landing on probably both, but I'll laugh anyway because I'm the boss and that's what I do. He laughed, really laughed, like I'd delivered the punchline to a joke he didn't quite get but didn't want to admit it. The people around him, his little entourage of corporate yes-men and yes-women with their plastered-on smiles and nervous energy, chuckled too, probably out of that primal fear of unemployment that makes office workers laugh at things that aren't funny and agree with opinions they don't share. It was like watching a nature documentary where the smaller animals mimic the alpha's behavior to avoid being eaten, except instead of the Serengeti, we were in a rented event space that smelled like expensive cologne and desperation. Gregory clapped me on the shoulder with that fake camaraderie that managers think creates team bonding, but actually just creates resentment and memes on private Slack channels. "Well, good for you, buddy," he said, and I hate being called buddy by people who aren't my buddies, but I let it slide because I was playing the long game here. It's great that Tessa has such a supportive partner who understands her career comes first. The way he said it made supportive partner sound like a participation trophy, like I was some stay-at-home puppy waiting for her to come home and feed me treats for being a good boy. I took a sip of champagne from a passing tray, mostly to give myself something to do with my hands besides making fists, and surveyed the room with fresh eyes. This wasn't just a party, it was a theatrical production, and Gregory was the self-appointed director, moving from group to group like a politician working a rally, touching shoulders, laughing too loud, making sure everyone knew he was the center of this particular universe. And as I watched him work the room, wrapping his arm around employees with that proprietary confidence, something clicked into place in my brain. This wasn't about celebrating the new branch. This was about celebrating Gregory, and everyone here was just an extra in his personal vanity project. Gregory had that voice that could make even small talk sound like an insult. You know what I mean? It was this particular combination of tone and cadence that somehow managed to be simultaneously patronizing and self-congratulatory, like every sentence that came out of his mouth was narrated by someone who thought they were the protagonist in a business school case study. The kind of voice that makes you want to check your pockets to make sure he didn't steal your wallet while complimenting your shoes. I've met guys like Gregory before. Hell, I've employed guys like Gregory before, back when I thought confidence and competence were the same thing, which was a mistake that cost me about 6 months of profits and a whole lot of Advil. As the evening progressed and the champagne flowed like someone had broken a dam made entirely of expensive French grapes, Gregory really hit his stride, working the room like a game show host who'd forgotten this wasn't actually a show. He started this impromptu speech about his company's expansion, using possessive pronouns with the kind of frequency that would make an English teacher weep, conveniently forgetting, or more likely, genuinely not knowing, that his entire operational budget, his fancy new branch, and probably the designer water bottles in the break room all came from a board of directors he'd never actually met face to face. Well, technically he'd met one of them, except he didn't know it yet because that particular board member was currently standing 3 feet away from him, sipping mediocre champagne and contemplating whether corporate sabotage via truth-telling counted as a misdemeanor or just good entertainment. This expansion, Gregory announced to a captive audience of employees who literally couldn't leave without it being noted on their performance reviews, represents everything we've built together as a team. I nearly choked on my drink at that one because we was doing some seriously heavy lifting in that sentence, like Atlas holding up the world except Atlas was taking full credit for the planet's existence. The man had this gift for making collective achievements sound like personal victories, the corporate equivalent of a guy who shows up to a group project presentation, contributes 1 slide, and then tells everyone at the party that he basically did the whole thing. But the real kicker came when he spotted Tessa in the crowd, and his face lit up like a dad seeing his kid at a school play, except creepier and with more HR violations waiting to happen. He navigated through the crowd with that purposeful stride that important people use when they want everyone to watch them walk, and before I could process what was happening, he'd wrapped an arm around my wife's shoulder with a casualness that made my eye twitch involuntarily. "She's our brightest employee," he proclaimed loudly enough that half the room turned to look, including a woman who I'm pretty sure was the actual brightest employee based on the way she rolled her eyes so hard I could hear it from across the room. "You should be proud she married up." Now, let me tell you something about that phrase, married up. It's one of those supposedly complimentary things that's actually just an insult wearing a party hat and pretending to be festive. It implies a hierarchy, a ladder, a ranking system where one person is objectively better than the other, and in this case, Gregory was heavily suggesting that my wife had climbed the social ladder by marrying someone who worked in her company, under his management, which would theoretically make him the peak of this metaphorical mountain. The logic was so backwards it could have been a pretzel, but here we were, living in Gregory's reality where he was the sun and everyone else was just grateful to be planets in his solar system. I sipped my champagne slowly, buying myself exactly 3 seconds to decide whether I was going to let this slide or whether I was going to start lighting matches in this powder keg of a conversation. Spoiler alert, I've never been good at letting things slide, mostly because my mouth has this annoying habit of operating independently from my brain's better judgment. "Oh, I'm extremely proud," I said, my voice dripping with the kind of sweetness that warns of incoming sarcasm like dark clouds before a thunderstorm. Some people climb ladders. Others just stand at the top and watch. The air around us got thick enough to cut with a knife. That special kind of tension that happens when someone says something that could be interpreted as either profound wisdom or a direct insult, depending on how much you're willing to think about it. Gregory's face went through this fascinating journey of expressions. First confusion, like he was trying to translate my words from English to English. Then a flicker of suspicion that maybe I'd just insulted him, but he couldn't quite figure out how. And finally landing on that fake laugh that people use when they're not sure if they should be offended but don't want to seem like they don't get it. He blinked at me, once, twice, 3 times, and I swear I could practically hear the Windows error sound effect playing in his head. That little doo-doo-doo noise that computers make when they've encountered a problem they can't solve. You could see his brain trying to reboot, searching through his internal database of power moves and conversational dominance tactics, coming up empty because nothing in his middle management training had prepared him for someone who wasn't intimidated by his title, his voice, or his aggressive handshake technique. Tessa, God bless her, was doing this thing where she was smiling but also looked like she wanted the floor to open up and swallow her whole, which I recognize as her "my husband is causing a scene and I don't know whether to be embarrassed or impressed" expression. I'd seen it before at dinner parties, family reunions, and that one time at the grocery store when I got into a philosophical debate with the cashier about the existential implications of self-checkout machines. Her hand tightened around her champagne glass, like she was considering whether the stem was strong enough to use as a weapon if this conversation went further south than it already had. The little crowd that had gathered around us for Gregory's impromptu Tessa appreciation moment was now doing that thing where they pretend they're not listening while obviously hanging on every word, their eyes darting between Gregory and me like spectators at a tennis match played entirely with passive-aggressive commentary. I could see them mentally taking notes, preparing the group chat messages they'd send the moment they got to the bathroom, screenshots and all. The buffet looked like it had been catered by an accountant with anxiety, which is to say everything was perfectly arranged, color-coordinated, and probably cost 3 times what it should have because someone convinced Gregory that imported cheeses and organic kale garnishes were essential for brand positioning. There were little cards with calligraphy explaining each dish like we were at a museum exhibit instead of a corporate party, because apparently shrimp cocktail needed a backstory involving sustainable fishing practices and artisanal cocktail sauce. I'm all for knowing where my food comes from, but when the description is longer than a CVS receipt, someone's trying too hard. I positioned myself strategically near the shrimp bowl, partly because I was actually hungry after skipping dinner in my excitement to crash this party, and partly because the buffet table offered an excellent vantage point for people watching without looking like a creep. It's amazing what you can learn about office dynamics by watching who eats with whom, who's avoiding the carbs, and who's on their 4th trip to the dessert station while pretending it's their first. The shrimp were pretty good, I'll give them that. Definitely not the frozen garbage you get at budget conferences where the ice sculpture costs more than the actual food. While I was contemplating whether it would be socially acceptable to just camp out next to the cocktail sauce for the rest of the evening, I became acutely aware that I'd become the subject of several whispered conversations happening at various points around the room. You know that feeling when you can't hear exactly what people are saying, but you can feel the weight of their judgment like humidity before a rainstorm? Yeah, that. Employees were giving me these side eyes that they thought were subtle but were about as discreet as a foghorn at a library, leaning into each other's personal space and murmuring things behind their champagne flutes like they were in a spy movie, except everyone could totally see them. I caught fragments of conversations as people passed by the buffet table, pretending to deliberate over cheese selections while actually trying to get a closer look at me. "That's her husband?" One woman in a navy pantsuit whispered to her colleague, her tone suggesting she'd expected someone either significantly more impressive or significantly less. I couldn't quite tell which. "He looks normal," another guy added, and I wasn't sure if that was a compliment or an insult, but given the context, I was leaning toward insult. In their defense, I probably didn't fit whatever mental image they'd constructed based on Tessa's mysterious, "I don't talk about my personal life at work" policy, which apparently had created a void that office gossip had filled with pure speculation and possibly a fantasy version of me that looked like a Hollywood handyman with abs and a tool belt. Gregory, because the universe has a sense of humor, and that sense of humor is mostly ironic, decided this was the perfect moment to make another appearance in my evening. He strutted by with the confidence of a peacock who'd just discovered mirrors, trailing a small entourage of what I assumed were either senior managers or people who'd lost a bet and had to follow him around all night. He stopped when he saw me, his face doing that thing where he was clearly trying to remember if he'd already talked to me or if all unimportant people just blurred together in his mind like background characters in a video game. "So what do you do for a living, He snapped his fingers like that would somehow summon my name from the void, which was particularly rich considering he'd already asked me this exact question earlier. But I guess when you're Gregory, people are only memorable if they're useful or if they have the authority to fire you. And he thought I was neither. "Marcus," I supplied helpfully, popping another shrimp into my mouth because if I was going to be interrogated about my career choices, I was at least going to do it while eating free food. "And I dabble in real estate. You could say I have a few properties under management." I kept my tone casual, like I was discussing a hobby rather than a business portfolio, because the best way to deliver information that's going to explode later is to make it sound as boring as possible in the moment. "Oh, like rentals?" he asked, and there it was again. That voice that could make even genuine questions sound condescending, like he was talking to a child who'd just announced they wanted to be an astronaut when they grew up. He said, "Rentals," the way someone might say adorable, while patting a puppy, with that tone that suggested he was humoring me by even engaging in this conversation. His entourage nodded along like those bobblehead dolls people put on their dashboards, agreeing with implications that hadn't even been fully stated yet. "More like entire buildings," I replied casually, reaching for a napkin because shrimp cocktail is delicious but messy, and I've learned that it's hard to maintain dignity while having cocktail sauce on your chin. I said it with the same energy someone might use to correct a minor detail, like, "Actually, it's pronounced Jif, not Jif," giving no indication that I'd just dropped information that should have made his brain perform emergency calculations about exactly who he'd been talking to for the past hour. He laughed again, and at this point, I was starting to think maybe Gregory just laughed at everything as a defense mechanism, like a nervous tick except wrapped in false confidence and expensive cologne. "Well, good for you. Must be nice to have a wife who brings home the big bucks." He said it loud enough that several people nearby turned to look, and I saw Tessa across the room physically wince, her shoulders tensing up like she'd just heard nails on a chalkboard. The implication was clear. In Gregory's worldview, I was a kept man, living off my wife's salary, probably spending my days watching daytime television and occasionally pretending to be productive with my rental properties that he clearly imagined were like two duplexes in a questionable neighborhood. "Yeah," I said, my smile getting wider because I could feel the punchline building in my chest like a sneeze you can't hold back. "She really owns this place." I let the words hang in the air, perfectly ambiguous, technically true in multiple ways that Gregory's brain was definitely not processing, because he was too busy enjoying what he thought was agreement with his assessment of our marriage dynamic. Tessa coughed into her wine glass across the room, a sound that I recognized as her, "Oh God, what is he doing now?" cough, the one that usually preceded her dragging me away from family dinners or party conversations before I could cause irreparable damage to our social standing. If irony were a currency, I'd have retired again, bought a private island, and named it "Told You So." Halfway through the night, when the champagne had sufficiently loosened everyone's professional facades and the room had reached that perfect level of corporate buzz where bad decisions start sounding like team-building opportunities, Gregory decided it was time for a toast. Because of course he did. You can't have a party celebrating Gregory without Gregory making a speech about Gregory, thinly disguised as appreciation for everyone else. It's like a law of physics or something. For every action of corporate success, there's an equal and opposite reaction of a middle manager taking credit for it. He tapped a spoon against his champagne glass with the kind of theatrical flair that suggested he'd been practicing this moment in his bathroom mirror, probably while wearing a bathrobe and imagining himself as some kind of business mogul in a movie montage. The crystal made this perfect little ringing sound that cut through the conversations like a knife through butter, and everyone obediently stopped talking and turned toward him like well-trained seals waiting for someone to throw them a fish. The room fell into that expectant silence that happens when the boss wants attention, the kind of silence that's less about genuine interest and more about self-preservation instincts kicking in. "Ladies and gentlemen," Gregory boomed, his voice taking on that motivational speaker quality that makes you want to either applaud or cringe, possibly both simultaneously. He raised his glass high, champagne sloshing dangerously close to the rim because he was more focused on looking important than on basic liquid physics. "Let's toast to success, and to the supportive partners who stay home and watch us shine." He delivered that last line with a wink and a gesture in my general direction, like he was doing me a favor by acknowledging my existence, like I should be grateful he'd included the stay-at-home spouses in his moment of corporate glory. The room erupted in laughter, that specific kind of obligatory office laughter that sounds less like genuine amusement and more like a survival mechanism, the auditory equivalent of showing your belly to a predator so they don't eat you. People raised their glasses dutifully, their smiles plastered on their faces with the same authenticity as a politician's campaign photo. I watched as several employees glanced in my direction with expressions ranging from pity to secondhand embarrassment, like they were watching someone get roasted at a comedy show, except nobody had signed up to be the volunteer. My wife smiled nervously, her face doing that thing where she was trying to look like she thought it was funny while also internally screaming, which I'd learned to recognize after 8 years of marriage and countless family dinners where my jokes landed somewhere between inappropriate and were never invited back here again. Her eyes met mine across the room with an apologetic intensity that could have melted steel, and I could practically read her thoughts. "Please don't make a scene. Please don't make a scene. Oh God, he's definitely going to make a scene." But here's the thing about me and moments like these. I've never been particularly good at letting condescending nonsense slide by without at least lobbing a verbal grenade in return. Call it a character flaw, call it pride, call it whatever you want. But when someone takes a shot at you disguised as a compliment, you've got two choices. Swallow it and smile, or return fire with interest. And I've always been more of a return fire kind of guy, mostly because swallowing your pride gives you indigestion and therapy bills. I raised my own glass slowly, deliberately, with the kind of casual confidence that comes from knowing something everyone else doesn't, which is basically my favorite position to be in at any social gathering. The movement caught Gregory's attention, and I saw his face light up with what he probably thought was camaraderie, like we were buddies now, bonding over his hilarious observation about traditional gender roles and spousal dynamics. "Oh, Gregory, buddy, you sweet summer child. You have no idea what's coming. Cheers to bosses who think success is a solo act," I announced, my voice carrying across the room with crystal clarity because unlike Gregory, I didn't need to shout to be heard. I just needed to say something interesting enough that people actually wanted to listen. I paused for exactly one beat, letting the words sink in just enough that people started doing mental math about whether I'd just said what they thought I'd said. "I'd toast your leadership, but I'm afraid the HR policy forbids fiction." The room went from polite laughter to absolutely deafening silence in about half a second, which is faster than most people can process a surprise plot twist in a movie. You could have heard a pin drop, except instead of a pin it was more like everyone's jaw simultaneously hitting the floor. Then, slowly, like a wave building before it crashes on the shore, genuine laughter started rippling through the crowd. Not that fake corporate laughter from before, but real, actual amusement from people who'd probably been waiting months or even years for someone to call out Gregory's particular brand of self-congratulatory leadership. The intern near the back, a kid who couldn't have been more than 23 and still had that fresh-out-of-college optimism that corporate life hadn't completely crushed yet, actually snorted into his drink, then looked absolutely terrified that he'd made an audible sound, his eyes going wide like a deer that just realized it's standing in the middle of a highway. A woman from accounting that I vaguely recognized from Tessa's company holiday card photos pressed her lips together so hard, trying not to laugh, that her face turned red, her shoulders shaking with suppressed amusement. Even some of the senior managers, The ones who probably had to deal with Gregory's ego on a daily basis couldn't quite hide their smirks behind their champagne glasses. The laughter this time wasn't polite. It was real, it was cathartic, and it was definitely at Gregory's expense rather than mine. It was the kind of laughter that happens when someone finally says out loud what everyone's been thinking in private Slack channels and bathroom conversations for months. You could feel the energy in the room shift, like someone had just flipped a switch, and suddenly this wasn't Gregory's party anymore. It was just a party, and the Emperor's clothes were looking pretty transparent under the crystal chandelier lighting. Gregory's face went through a fascinating evolution of expressions in the span of about 5 seconds. First came confusion, because his brain was still processing whether what I'd said was a compliment wrapped in weird phrasing or an actual insult. Then came the dawning realization as he replayed my words in his head, and his face started to flush, that particular shade of red that happens when someone's blood pressure spikes and their ego takes a direct hit simultaneously. His smile, that perfectly practiced CEO smile that probably cost him hours of mirror time, twitched at the corners like it was trying to decide whether to stay put or abandon ship entirely. The man hated being out funny Ed. You could see it written all over his face like subtitles in a foreign film. In his world, he was the one who made the jokes, he was the one who got the laughs, he was the center of attention, and everyone else was just the supporting cast. Having someone, especially someone he'd categorized as unimportant, as just the supportive spouse who stayed home, flipped the script on him in front of his entire staff, was probably the social equivalent of getting pantsed at prom. His entourage, those loyal followers who'd been nodding along to everything he said all night, suddenly found the floor very interesting, studying their shoes like they contained the secrets of the universe. As dessert rolled in, tiny, pretentious things that looked like they'd been assembled by surgeons rather than pastry chefs, each one a work of art that probably cost $15 and would disappear in one bite. Gregory was clearly regrouping, gathering his wounded pride like a general rallying troops after an unexpected ambush. I could see it in the way he straightened his shoulders, adjusted his tie, and scanned the room with renewed determination. He wasn't going to let some nobody spouse get the last laugh at his party, at his event, in his moment of glory. Oh no, Gregory was about to make a comeback, and I could smell it coming like rain before a storm. He made his way back over to where I was standing, having migrated from the shrimp station to the dessert table, because if you're going to watch a man dig his own grave, you might as well do it while eating a chocolate mousse that costs more than most people's lunch budgets. His entourage had thinned out a bit. Apparently, public humiliation isn't great for maintaining your follower count, but he still had a couple of loyal supporters flanking him like Secret Service agents protecting someone who definitely didn't deserve protection. Gregory leaned in with that smirk again, the one that had probably worked on intimidating junior employees and interns, but was about to be as effective as a water gun at a house fire. You could tell he thought he was being clever, that he'd found the perfect angle to reassert his dominance in this increasingly weird social chess match we were playing. "So, Marcus," he said, my name dripping with condescension like honey from a particularly aggressive bear, "how does it feel being married to the real breadwinner?" Now, there are moments in life where you can choose to be the bigger person, to take the high road, to smile and nod and let ignorance slide by without comment. This was not going to be one of those moments. I'd already committed to this path the second I walked through those doors uninvited, and there's no point in half-assing chaos once you've decided to embrace it fully. Plus, that chocolate mousse had given me the sugar rush I needed to really commit to what was about to happen. I grinned at him, the kind of smile that probably should have served as a warning label, like those signs at amusement parks that say, "You must be this tall to ride," except mine would say, "You must be this prepared for your world to flip upside down." "Delicious, actually," I said, taking another spoonful of mousse for dramatic effect, "especially since the bread comes from my bakery." I let that hang in the air for exactly 2 seconds, watching his face scrunch up in confusion like he was trying to solve a math problem that didn't have enough numbers. "Sorry, what?" Gregory said, his smirk faltering like a car engine that just realized it was out of gas. Around us, conversations had started to die down again because apparently I'd become the evening's entertainment, which was fine by me since I'd paid for the venue anyway, though Gregory didn't know that yet. The word, yet, was doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence. I turned toward the chief financial officer, Clara, who had been sitting quietly at a nearby table for most of the evening, nursing the same glass of wine and watching the proceedings with the tired expression of someone who'd seen this movie before and knew how it ended. Clara was one of those sharp, no-nonsense women in her 50s who'd probably forgotten more about running a business than Gregory would ever learn, and I'd always appreciated her direct communication style and her ability to make grown men cry during budget meetings. "Clara," I called out, my voice friendly but loud enough that everyone within a 20-foot radius could hear, which at this point was basically everyone because the entire party had somehow migrated toward our little drama like moths to a particularly entertaining flame. "Could you pass me the check file? The one you and I signed when we approved the new branch budget." Her fork, which had been halfway to her mouth with what looked like a very expensive piece of cheesecake, froze in midair. Her eyes widened just slightly, and I watched her brain process what I'd just asked, what I'd just implied, and what was about to happen in the next 60 seconds. To her credit, she didn't miss a beat. Clara hadn't gotten to CFO by being slow on the uptake or bad at reading rooms. "Sir," she said, and that single word, "sir," dropped into the conversation like a nuclear bomb with a polite accent. "You mean the file?" The temperature in the room dropped about 15 degrees. Suddenly, everyone's champagne tasted a little different. The crystal lights seemed a little brighter, and the background music that had been playing all night became very conspicuous in its suddenly noticeable presence. People shifted in their seats, set down their drinks, turned toward our little tableau like we were the main act in a play they'd accidentally bought tickets for. Gregory looked confused, which was fair because his entire understanding of the corporate hierarchy was currently being challenged in real time. He glanced between me and Clara like he was watching a tennis match, except instead of a ball being volleyed back and forth, it was his career and reputation. "What file?" he asked, his voice not quite as confident as it had been 30 seconds ago. "What are you talking about?" I could see the wheels turning in his head, smoke practically coming out of his ears as he tried to piece together what was happening. The problem with guys like Gregory is that they're so convinced they're at the top of the food chain that they never bother to look up and check if there's something bigger swimming above them. They see the title on their door, the respect from their direct reports, and assume that's the whole picture, never considering that maybe they're middle management in someone else's empire. Several other senior staff members had gone very still, the kind of still that happens when animals sense a predator nearby. The VP of operations, whose name I remembered was something like Gerald or maybe Jerome. Honestly, I tried not to memorize everyone's names because that felt like overkill, had gone pale, his dessert fork clattering onto his plate with a sound that echoed in the increasingly quiet room. The head of HR, a woman named Patricia who I'd met exactly twice in board meetings and who ran her department with the efficiency of a Swiss watch and the mercy of a medieval executioner, had her hand over her mouth, her eyes darting between Gregory and me like she was already mentally drafting the paperwork that was going to follow this conversation. "I think," Clara said slowly, setting down her fork with deliberate care and reaching for her phone, which I knew contained all the relevant files because Clara was nothing if not prepared for every possible scenario including, apparently, the surprise appearance of the company's majority shareholder at a branch opening where said shareholder proceeds to destroy the CEO's ego in front of the entire staff. That Mr. Hale is referring to the Q3 expansion budget that was approved by the board last quarter. "Mr. Hale," Gregory repeated, his voice cracking slightly on my last name like it was a foreign word he'd never encountered before. His face was doing this fascinating thing where confusion was slowly morphing into dawning horror, like watching someone realize they'd been swimming in the shallow end of the pool while thinking they were in the ocean. "Wait, Hale? Like Hale Industries? Like the company you work for?" "Yes." I finished for him, because watching people connect dots in real time is one of my favorite spectator sports, right up there with watching someone try to assemble IKEA furniture without reading the instructions. I stood up slowly, taking my time because moments like these deserve to be savored like a fine wine or a really good revenge plot in a movie where the hero finally reveals they were 10 steps ahead the whole time. I adjusted my jacket with the kind of casual precision that suggested this wasn't a big deal to me, which it wasn't, but was clearly becoming the biggest deal of Gregory's entire professional life based on the way all the color had drained from his face like someone had pulled a plug at the bottom of his feet. The room had gone so quiet you could hear the ice melting in people's drinks, the soft buzz of the crystal chandeliers overhead, and what I'm pretty sure was Gregory's heart rate accelerating to dangerous levels. I smiled, and not the fake corporate smile that everyone had been wearing like masks all evening, but a genuine smile, the kind that comes from deep satisfaction and the knowledge that you're about to drop a truth bomb so massive it'll register on the Richter scale. "I'm Marcus Hale," I said, letting each word land with the weight of a judge's gavel in a courtroom drama. "Majority shareholder and founder of this company. You've been working for me, Greg." I dropped the Ori from his name deliberately, because nothing says "I own you" quite like unauthorized nickname privileges, and also because I knew it would irritate him, which at this point was just the cherry on top of an already delicious sundae of schadenfreude. The reaction was immediate and spectacular. Gasps rippled through the hall like a wave at a baseball game. Except instead of coordinated fun, it was pure shock and disbelief spreading from person to person as the implications of what I'd just said registered in their champagne-soaked brains. Someone dropped a glass. I heard it shatter somewhere near the back of the room. And honestly, that was perfect timing, really added to the dramatic atmosphere. The DJ, bless his heart, had been playing some generic smooth jazz background music all night. And in this moment of cosmic comedy, the track ended right as I finished speaking, leaving us in complete silence except for the sound of Gregory's world crumbling around him like a sandcastle at high tide. People's phones started coming out, not even subtly, just blatantly held up like they were at a concert, and I was the headlining act. I saw at least 5 people open their LinkedIn apps, probably to confirm what I'd just said, searching Marcus Hale and Hale Industries, and watching their entire understanding of the evening's power dynamics get rewritten in real time. The intern who'd snorted earlier looked like he might pass out from the sheer drama of it all, his eyes wide enough to see the whites all the way around, his mouth hanging open in that perfect O shape that you usually only see in cartoons. Gregory stuttered, actually stuttered, and I'd never seen him at a loss for words before, because the man normally had verbal diarrhea, just couldn't shut up if his life depended on it. But right now he was struggling to form complete sentences like he'd forgotten how language worked. You're joking," he finally managed, his voice cracking like a teenager going through puberty. His face had gone from red to white to a kind of grayish-green that suggested his expensive dinner might be making a return appearance soon. "This is some kind of, you can't be. Wouldn't that be convenient?" I replied, my tone conversational, like we were discussing the weather instead of his complete professional annihilation. I took a step closer to him, not threatening, just closing the distance enough that he couldn't mistake my next words for anything other than what they were, a statement of fact delivered with the full weight of ownership behind it. "You've been mocking your staff, misusing funds, and flirting with my wife. Not the best performance review, huh?" That last part about flirting with Tessa was maybe a slight exaggeration. Gregory had been condescending and possessive, but not overtly flirty. But I figured if we were already burning bridges, we might as well throw some extra gasoline on the fire for good measure. Plus, I'd seen the way he touched her shoulder earlier, that casual ownership that bosses sometimes claim over their employees like they're property instead of people, and that had pissed me off more than all the condescending comments about my supposed career as a kept husband combined. He turned even paler, if that was possible, like someone had applied a second coat of white paint over the first. "Sir, he started, and hearing him call me sir after an evening of buddy and barely disguised contempt was its own special kind of satisfaction. It was like watching a bully realize the kid they've been picking on is actually the principal's son, except in this case, I wasn't the principal's son, I was the guy who owned the whole damn school. "Don't worry," I said, cutting him off before he could launch into whatever groveling explanation or desperate excuse he was formulating in his panic-stricken brain. "I won't fire you here. HR hates paperwork during parties." I glanced over at Patricia, the head of HR, who despite the chaos was taking notes on her phone with the dedication of a court stenographer, probably already drafting the separation agreement in her head. But by Monday, I expect a resignation letter so polished it blinds me. Single-spaced, proper formatting, maybe throw in some of that corporate buzzword salad you're so fond of. Really make it sing. The room was still frozen, everyone processing this shift in reality like their brains needed to reboot. Clara was hiding a smile behind her wine glass. and I caught her eye and gave her a small nod of acknowledgement because she'd played her part perfectly, and also because I knew she'd been dealing with Gregory's nonsense for months and was probably enjoying this moment as much as I was. The VP of Operations. I decided his name was definitely Gerald. Looked like he was running calculations in his head, probably trying to figure out if he'd ever been dismissive to me at any board meetings and whether his own job was in jeopardy. Tessa, across the room, had her hand over her mouth, her eyes wider than I'd ever seen them, and I couldn't quite read her expression. Was it horror? Shock? Admiration? Probably some combination of all three plus a healthy dose of, I can't believe you just did that, and we're going to have a very long conversation about this when we get home. But underneath it all, I saw something else, a flicker of satisfaction, maybe even pride, because as much as she might scold me later for the dramatic reveal, I knew she'd been dealing with Gregory's condescension too, and watching him get taken down several dozen pegs had to feel at least a little bit good. Gregory's entourage had completely abandoned him at this point, backing away like he was radioactive, which in career terms, he absolutely was. Nobody wants to be associated with the guy who just got publicly destroyed by the owner of the company, especially when said destruction was entirely his own fault for being an arrogant jerk who couldn't resist mocking the wrong person. It was like watching rats desert a sinking ship, except the rats were middle managers in expensive suits, and the ship was Gregory's career and reputation going down in flames. I think, Clara said into the silence, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd been CFO long enough to see everything and be surprised by nothing. That concludes this evening's entertainment. Perhaps we should all head home and reconvene during normal business hours. It was a diplomatic way of saying show's over, folks, nothing more to see here. And also a graceful exit strategy for everyone who didn't want to be standing in the blast radius when this situation got even more awkward, which it inevitably would if everyone kept standing around staring. People started moving, slowly at first, then faster as they realized this was their chance to escape, and immediately start texting everyone they knew about what they'd just witnessed. I walked out to slow claps. Literally, actual slow claps. And not the sarcastic kind that usually accompanies someone's spectacular failure, but the genuine, appreciative kind that you hear in movies when the underdog finally stands up to the bully. Except in this case, I wasn't really the underdog. I was more like the secret final boss who'd been disguised as a regular NPC the whole time. The intern started it, which was fitting because interns are usually the only people in corporate America who still have enough soul left to appreciate good drama when they see it. One brave kid near the dessert table just started clapping, slowly, deliberately, and then his friend joined in. And then suddenly it spread like wildfire through the younger employees who'd probably been on the receiving end of Gregory's condescension more times than they could count. The senior staff looked conflicted, caught between wanting to join in and worrying about whether applauding the public humiliation of their now former CEO was a career-limiting move, which honestly, fair enough. Corporate survival instincts are strong, and nobody wants to be the person who backed the wrong horse, even when the wrong horse was clearly a jackass who'd been riding everyone else's coattails to success. But a few of them, the ones who'd probably been around long enough to not care anymore or who'd reached that perfect level of seniority where they could get away with anything short of embezzlement, gave me subtle nods of approval, the corporate equivalent of a standing ovation. I made my way through the crowd, which parted for me like I was Moses and they were the Red Sea, except instead of fleeing from Pharaoh's army, they were fleeing from the awkwardness of making eye contact with me after spending the entire evening treating me like the help. It was beautiful in its own weird way, watching people suddenly remember that they'd maybe been less than welcoming to the guy who signed their paychecks, their faces doing mental gymnastics trying to recall if they'd said anything insulting within my earshot. Spoiler alert. Several of them definitely had, but I wasn't keeping score. Okay, fine, I was totally keeping score, but I wasn't going to do anything about it because I'm petty, not vindictive. There's a difference, and it's a line I maintain with great care. The fresh night air hit my face as I walked through those glass doors, and let me tell you, it felt better than the champagne, better than the chocolate mousse, better than any of the overpriced everything that had filled that venue. It was the air of freedom, of justice served, of a job well done, with just a hint of expensive cologne and urban downtown smells that reminded me why I usually avoided these kinds of events. The city was alive around me, completely unaware that inside that building, a small corporate drama had just played out like a Greek tragedy, except with better lighting and worse moral lessons. Behind me, I could hear the whispers buzzing like a hive of very gossipy bees, fragments of conversations floating through the doors before they swung shut. "That's the owner," one voice said, high-pitched with disbelief. "Oh my God," Greg's finished, another added, and I heard what sounded like genuine schadenfreude in that tone, which suggested Gregory hadn't exactly been winning any popularity contests among his staff. "Did you see his face?" Someone else chimed in, followed by laughter that was probably accompanied by frantic texting and screenshots being shared on whatever group chat these people use to survive their workdays. I chuckled to myself, pulling out my phone to text Liam that I was ready for pickup, because yes, I'd arranged for my driver to be on standby, because I'm not an amateur and I knew this evening was either going to end with me making a dramatic exit or being escorted out by security, and either way, I didn't want to deal with parking. My driver, Victor, pulled up in the black sedan within 30 seconds. The man had timing that would make a Swiss watchmaker jealous, and opened the car door with the kind of professional discretion that comes from years of driving rich people to and from situations they probably shouldn't have gotten themselves into in the first place. "Good evening, sir," Victor said, his face perfectly neutral except for the tiny smirk playing at the corner of his mouth, because Victor had been with me long enough to know when I'd been up to something. "Successful event?" He asked it casually, like he was inquiring about the weather, but I could hear the genuine curiosity underneath because I'd given him exactly zero details about why I needed a driver for my wife's office party. And Victor was smart enough to know that when I was being deliberately vague, entertainment was sure to follow. "Educational," I said, sliding into the leather seat that still smelled like new car even though the sedan was 3 years old, because Victor maintained this vehicle better than most people maintain their relationships. "We learned our CEO is allergic to humility, accountability, and basic human decency. Also that shrimp cocktail at corporate events is surprisingly decent, so the evening wasn't a complete waste." Buckled my seatbelt while Victor closed my door with that perfect soft click that expensive cars make, the kind that whispers, "You paid too much for this," in the most satisfying way possible. He smirked for real this time as he got into the driver's seat, adjusting the rearview mirror even though it didn't need adjusting, just giving himself something to do while he processed what I'd said. "I'll have HR draft a resignation gift basket," Victor offered, and this was why I liked him. The man understood that sometimes the best response to corporate drama was more corporate drama, wrapped up in the absurd formality of office traditions like gift baskets that nobody actually wants but everyone feels obligated to give. "Include tissues," I said, settling back into the seat and watching the city lights blur past as we pulled away from the curb. "Make it thoughtful. Maybe throw in one of those motivational books about how to bounce back from career setbacks. Really lean into the irony." I was being facetious, obviously. HR wasn't actually going to send Gregory a gift basket. That would be adding insult to injury in a way that crossed the line from justified payback into cruel and unusual punishment. And I tried to maintain at least some semblance of professional standards even when publicly destroying someone's ego. Victor chuckled, a deep sound that rumbled from his chest, and I saw his shoulders shake with barely suppressed laughter. "Shall I take the scenic route home, sir? Or do you need to get back quickly before Mrs. Hale calls wondering where you disappeared to?" It was a valid question because Tessa had definitely seen me leave, and she was probably currently having a mild panic attack while trying to decide whether to follow me out or stay and do damage control with her colleagues who'd just discovered her husband was basically their ultimate boss. Scenic route, I decided, because I wasn't quite ready to face the music yet, and by music I meant my wife's inevitable interrogation about why I decided tonight was the perfect night to reveal my identity instead of, I don't know, mentioning it casually over breakfast sometime in the past 3 weeks when she'd been complaining about Gregory's management style. Give me at least 20 minutes to come up with a good explanation for why I crashed her office party and destroyed her boss's career in front of everyone she works with. Might I suggest leading with "he deserved it"? Victor offered helpfully, merging into traffic with the smooth confidence of someone who'd been navigating city streets for longer than some of these other drivers had been alive. I find that establishing moral high ground early in an argument significantly improves outcomes. "Victor, Buddy, you're a philosopher and a driver, I said, pulling out my phone to check my messages, which had already started coming in. Liam had sent approximately 7 texts, each one more excited than the last. Apparently, the intern network had already spread word about what happened, and it had reached social media faster than a celebrity scandal. Clara had sent a simple, well played, sir, with a wine glass emoji, which was high praise coming from her. And Tessa had sent a single text that just said, we need to talk, with a period at the end, which in wife speak translated to, you're not in trouble exactly, but you're definitely going to have to explain yourself, and it better be good. I typed back a quick, on my way home, love you, and added a heart emoji because sometimes the best defense is a good offense. Or in this case, a preemptive reminder that whatever I'd done it from a place of love and protecting her from a boss who clearly didn't respect her or her husband. Whether that excuse would actually work remained to be seen, but I had 20 minutes of scenic route to refine my argument, and I'd talk my way out of worse situations. Probably. Maybe. Okay, definitely not. But optimism is important in a marriage. Tessa came home later, much later than I'd expected, which gave me way too much time to sit on the couch rehearsing my defense like a lawyer preparing for the trial of the century. Except my opposing counsel was my wife, and she had access to all my weak points and emotional vulnerabilities. I'd changed out of my suit into sweatpants and a t-shirt, partly for comfort and partly because it's harder to stay mad at someone in sweatpants. It's a scientific fact I just made up, but choose to believe anyway. I heard her keys in the door around 11:30, that distinctive jangle followed by the sound of her heels clicking on the hardwood floor with a rhythm that suggested she was either exhausted or furious, possibly both. When she walked into the living room, her makeup was smeared, mascara tracking down her cheeks in thin black lines that made her look like she'd either been crying or had gotten caught in unexpected rain. Except I knew it wasn't raining because I checked. Her hair, which had been perfectly styled in that professional updo thing she does for important events, was coming loose, strands falling around her face in a way that would have been romantic if the circumstances were different, and she wasn't looking at me like I'd just told her I'd sold her car to buy magic beans. Her voice came out small, tired, nothing like her usual confident tone that could silence a conference room. Why didn't you tell me you own the company? It wasn't an accusation exactly, more like genuine confusion mixed with hurt, and that hit harder than anger would have, because I can handle anger. Anger is clean, straightforward, something you can argue against. But hurt? Hurt is complicated, messy, the kind of thing that requires actual emotional intelligence and mature communication skills that I definitely had somewhere in my repertoire, if I could just remember where I'd put them. I patted the couch cushion next to me, an invitation she ignored, choosing instead to stand there in the middle of our living room like she was testifying in court and sitting would somehow weaken her case. Because, sweetheart, I said, trying to find the words that would explain a decision that had made perfect sense to me 3 weeks ago but now, faced with her smudged makeup and wounded expression, seemed maybe less brilliant than I'd originally thought. Sometimes the best way to see a person's character is to step out of the spotlight and watch what they do when they think you're nobody. I meant Gregory, obviously, but I could see from her face that she was also processing what this meant about her colleagues, about the way people had treated both of us all evening, about the whole social experiment I'd been conducting without her knowledge or consent. She started to cry, really cry, not the angry tears that come with yelling matches, but the sad, frustrated ones that somehow feel worse because they're quieter, more genuine. She sank onto the arm of the couch, not quite sitting with me, but not standing anymore either, her body language screaming exhaustion and emotional overload. I was just embarrassed, she said, her voice catching on the words like they had sharp edges. That whole night, I was embarrassed. Of you, of me, of us. She looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. I didn't want people thinking I married you for money, that I slept my way to my position, that everything I've worked for was just because my husband owns the damn company. And there it was, the real issue underneath all of this, the thing I probably should have considered before deciding to play corporate Batman and reveal my secret identity at her office party. Tessa was proud, fiercely independent, the kind of person who'd rather die than have someone think she didn't earn her success through her own merit and hard work. She'd been building her career at this company for 3 years before we even met, had worked her way up from junior analyst to senior manager through actual competence and dedication. And now everyone she worked with was going to wonder if her promotions had been legitimate or if they'd been gifts from her husband, who happened to own everything. "Tess," I said softly, reaching for her hand, which she let me take even though she was still crying, still processing, still angry in that complicated way that meant we were going to be okay eventually, but the road there was going to involve a lot of talking and probably some more crying. "You earned your position. You're brilliant at what you do, and everyone knows it. Gregory was the one who didn't deserve his job, not you." It was true. I'd looked at her performance reviews, her project completions, her client satisfaction ratings, all without her knowing because I tried to keep my personal and professional lives separate right up until they collided spectacularly tonight. She shook her head, tears still falling, and I grabbed the tissue box from the side table, offering it to her like a white flag in our domestic negotiation. "That's not how it's going to look, Marcus. That's not what people are going to say. By Monday morning, the whole office is going to be whispering about how I've been sleeping with the owner's wife." "Wait, that doesn't make sense. Sleeping with the owner while pretending to just be a normal employee." She blew her nose, a honking sound that was somehow both miserable and adorable. "I'm going to be that person. The boss's wife. Everything I do from now on is going to be suspect." I nodded, acknowledging the validity of her concern because she wasn't wrong. Office politics were brutal, and people loved a good conspiracy theory more than they loved actual facts. "Don't worry, Tess," I said, and I could feel the joke forming before my brain could stop my mouth, which has always been a problem I should probably work on. "They'll think you run HR by tomorrow morning after your boss's resignation hits LinkedIn." I said it trying to lighten the mood, to inject some levity into this heavy conversation, but I realized about halfway through the sentence that maybe this wasn't the right moment. Her glare could have melted steel, could have cut through titanium, could have vaporized whatever remained of my hope that humor was going to save me from this conversation. Her eyes, still watery from crying, narrowed into slits that promised retribution, possibly involving my favorite gaming console being donated to charity or my craft beer collection mysteriously disappearing. "What?" she said, her voice dangerously quiet, the kind of quiet that comes before storms and volcanic eruptions. "Too soon." I smiled sweetly, the kind of smile that acknowledged I'd just stepped in it, but was committed to the bit anyway, because backing down now would be admitting defeat, and I'd already committed so many crimes against good judgment tonight that one more couldn't hurt. "Maybe a little too soon," I admitted, squeezing her hand. But in my defense, the joke was right there, and you know I can't resist low-hanging fruit. She pulled her hand away, but I caught the corner of her mouth twitching, fighting against the smile that wanted to break through her anger and hurt. By Monday morning, Gregory's resignation email hit every inbox like a fireworks show, except instead of oohs and ahs, it was met with frantic forwarding, screenshot sharing, and the kind of office gossip that usually only happens when someone gets caught doing something truly scandalous in the supply closet. I wasn't even in the office. I work from home most days because what's the point of owning a company if you have to sit in traffic and pretend to enjoy fluorescent lighting? But Liam sent me updates every 15 minutes like he was providing play-by-play commentary for the Super Bowl of corporate drama. Email arrived at 8:47 a.m. His first text read, subject line, "A new chapter." He used the word synergy 3 times in the first paragraph. It's physically painful to read. Followed by, "Break room is packed. Someone brought donuts. This is better than the time Karen from accounting got caught catfishing the intern." And then, update. People are printing it out. Printing it. Like it's a historical document. I saw someone laminating a copy. "Sir, they're laminating it." I sat at my home office desk, coffee in hand, reading through Gregory's resignation letter that Clara had forwarded to me for official review, which was corporate speak for, "You need to see this masterpiece of passive-aggressive professional suicide." The letter was exactly what I'd expected. A carefully worded piece of fiction that made it sound like Gregory was leaving to pursue other opportunities and focus on personal growth, with absolutely no mention of the fact that he'd spent an entire evening being condescending to the company owner, while said owner was pretending to be a stay-at-home handyman. It was corporate poetry, really, the way he managed to make getting fired sound like a voluntary journey of self-discovery. The board congratulated me through a flurry of emails that arrived throughout the morning, each one more enthusiastic than the last. A graceful intervention, the chairman called it, which was a polite way of saying, "Thank God someone finally dealt with that problem. Long overdue." Added another board member who'd apparently been waiting for an excuse to get rid of Gregory for months, but hadn't wanted to deal with the paperwork. They scheduled an emergency meeting for Tuesday to discuss interim leadership, succession planning, and probably to hear the full story, because I'd kept my little party-crashing adventure to myself, and they were definitely curious about how exactly their reclusive majority shareholder had ended up at a branch opening, let alone demolishing the CEO in front of the entire staff. The CFO, Clara, sent a fruit basket to my house, which arrived around noon with a card that simply said, "Worth every penny of the catering budget," and included a bottle of very expensive scotch tucked between the apples and oranges, because Clara understood that some victories required celebration that went beyond fruit. I texted her a photo of the basket with a thank you message, and she responded with, "The break room has a betting pool on who the interim CEO will be. I'm currently the favorite at 3:1 odds. Should I be concerned?" I told her she should absolutely be concerned, but also flattered, and that I'd talk to her later in the week about potential next steps, which was my way of saying, "Yes, you're probably getting promoted, but let's pretend there's some suspense here." HR, specifically Patricia, the head of HR who I was 90% sure never slept and instead survived purely on efficiency and the tears of policy violators, sent me a meme. An actual meme. It was that gif of someone walking away from an explosion without looking back, captioned, "Marcus Hale, leaving the branch opening 2025, colorized." I didn't even know Patricia knew what memes were, let alone that she had a sense of humor hiding underneath that professional exterior. I responded with a laughing emoji and a note saying, "Please confirm this doesn't violate any HR policies before I share it with the board," and she sent back, "I'll allow it," with a winking emoji that somehow made the whole thing even funnier. But the real aftermath wasn't in the emails or the memes or the office gossip. It was at home, in the weird tension that had settled over our house like fog over a harbor, making everything feel slightly off-kilter and uncertain. Tessa had apologized again Sunday morning over coffee and pancakes that I'd made as a peace offering, because I've learned that carbs and maple syrup are excellent relationship maintenance tools. She'd woken up with clearer eyes and a calmer demeanor, the kind that comes after a good night's sleep and some emotional processing time. "I'm sorry I said I was embarrassed of you," she said, pouring syrup with the precision of someone who was trying to focus on something other than difficult emotions. "That came out wrong. I wasn't embarrassed of you. I was embarrassed of the situation, of what people would think, of having my professional life and personal life collide in the most spectacular way possible." She looked up at me, fork hovering over her pancakes. "But I shouldn't have made you feel like you did something wrong by defending yourself. Gregory was being a complete ass, and honestly, someone needed to take him down several pegs. I just wish it hadn't been quite so public." I listened quietly, which was maybe the most mature thing I'd done all weekend, because Tessa needed to talk through this and I needed to shut up and let her, which goes against every instinct I have, but is apparently what healthy communication looks like according to the relationship books Liam keeps leaving on my desk like he's trying to tell me something. Some lessons I've learned over 8 years of marriage and countless smaller disasters. Need silence more than explanations, need listening more than defending, need space to breathe rather than immediate solutions. "I get it," I said after she'd finished, after she'd eaten 3 bites of pancake and pushed her plate around nervously waiting for my response. "I should have told you who I was, or at least given you a heads up before I showed up. It wasn't fair to surprise you like that, to put you in a position where you had to find out the same time everyone else did. I meant it, too. In retrospect, which is always 2020 and conveniently arrives after you've already made all your mistakes, I could see how my little revenge plot had collateral damage that included my wife's professional reputation and peace of mind." She reached across the table and took my hand, syrup-sticky fingers and all. "Next time you decide to reveal you're secretly Batman or whatever," she said, and I could see the smile starting to break through despite her best efforts to stay serious. "Maybe give me a heads up, like a text that says, 'Hey honey, planning to destroy your boss tonight. Wear something nice?' Deal?" I said, squeezing her hand. Although technically I'm more like Bruce Wayne than Batman, since I don't fight crime. I just occasionally humiliate people who deserve it while wearing expensive suits. She laughed at that. Real laughter that meant we were going to be okay. That this would eventually become one of those stories we told at dinner parties in 10 years, embellished and exaggerated until it barely resembled what actually happened. The week progressed with a strange mixture of normalcy and chaos. Tessa went to work Monday and reported back that the office was split between people who thought I was a hero for standing up to Gregory, people who thought I was a dramatic attention seeker who could have handled it more professionally, and people who were just excited to have something interesting to talk about besides quarterly reports and the broken coffee machine on the third floor. Her colleagues treated her differently. Not worse, necessarily, but different, like she'd suddenly become made of glass or important china that might break if handled incorrectly. Sarah from marketing asked if she should curtsy when she sees me now. Tessa reported over dinner Wednesday night, her tone somewhere between amused and exasperated. And Derek from sales wanted to know if I could put in a good word about his commission structure, like I have any influence over that. She stabbed at her salad with more force than necessary. Oh, and Jenny from accounting asked if we're hiring, because apparently now everyone thinks I'm the secret gateway to employment. I made appropriately sympathetic noises while trying not to laugh, because this was exactly what Tessa had been worried about, and I didn't want to seem like I was taking her concerns lightly, even though the image of someone curtsying to my wife in the break room was objectively hilarious. Give it time, I said, which is what you say when you don't have actual solutions but want to sound wise and supportive. Once they get used to it, once there's new gossip to focus on, it'll settle down. You're still the same person doing the same excellent work. By Thursday, Clara had been officially named interim CEO, and her first act was sending a company-wide email about rebuilding trust and fostering genuine team culture, which was professional speak for the previous guy was a tool, and we're going to do better. She scheduled one-on-ones with every department head, including Tessa, and apparently spent the entire meeting asking about Tessa's ideas for improving operations without once mentioning me or the party or anything related to the drama, which Tessa appreciated more than any explicit reassurance could have provided. Friday afternoon, as I was wrapping up work for the week and contemplating whether I'd earned a beer or if it was still too early for alcohol, my phone rang with an unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Unknown numbers are usually either spam calls about my car's extended warranty or relatives I've been avoiding, but something made me pick up. Marcus Hale. I answered, using my professional voice that I reserve for people who might be important. Mr. Hale, this is Bradley Chun from the Business Chronicle, a young-sounding voice said, and I could hear typing in the background like he was already writing the article while we spoke. I'm doing a piece on leadership styles in modern corporations, and I heard about an interesting incident at your company's recent branch opening. Would you be available for comment? I leaned back in my chair, considering whether talking to a reporter about the Gregory situation was a brilliant PR move or a terrible idea that would haunt me forever. Off the record, I asked, because I've dealt with reporters before and I know how this game works. The incident you're referring to was a reminder that leadership is about respect, not hierarchy. About earning your position through competence rather than assuming it through title. But on the record, you can quote me as saying Hale Industries is committed to fostering a workplace culture based on mutual respect and genuine achievement. He tried to push for more details, for the juicy gossip that would make his article go viral, but I deflected with the skill of someone who's sat through enough board meetings to know how to say nothing while sounding like you said something important. We ended the call with him slightly disappointed and me relieved that I'd managed to navigate that particular minefield without creating more problems. As I left for work, which is to say, walked from my home office to the living room because the commute is terrible, but at least there's no traffic, I turned back and saw Tessa sitting on the couch, laptop open, probably reviewing something for Monday's meetings. Next time you invite me to your office events, I said, unable to resist one final callback to the whole mess. Just remember, I pay the caterer. She groaned, the kind of groan that's 50% annoyance and 50% affection, the sound of someone who's resigned to spending their life with a person who can't resist a good one-liner even when silence would be the smarter choice. I'm never inviting you to another work event, she said, but she was smiling when she said it, which meant she was lying, which meant we were definitely okay. You're banned. Blacklisted. I'm putting your photo up at security with "Do not admit" written underneath. I winked at her, because winking is my signature move when I've said something ridiculous and want to acknowledge it while also committing to the bit. Too late, sweetheart. I own security too. I'm already on the list as that guy who can go anywhere because he literally owns the building. She threw a couch pillow at me, which I deserved, and I caught it because my reflexes are surprisingly good for someone who spends most of his day sitting at a desk making financial decisions. And in that moment, with my wife laughing despite herself and the week's chaos finally settling into something resembling normalcy, I realized something important. Revenge isn't always about rage, about getting even, about making someone pay for their mistakes in the most dramatic way possible. Sometimes revenge is quieter than that. Sometimes it's about showing up when you're not expected, about refusing to be diminished by someone else's arrogance, about standing in a room full of people who underestimated you and letting them realize, slowly, painfully, unforgettably, that they never knew who they were dealing with in the first place. It's about the moment of recognition in someone's eyes when they understand they've been playing checkers while you were playing chess, that their entire evening of condescension was being observed and cataloged by the one person who had the power to make it mean something. It's about smiling through the insults, letting them pile up like kindling, and then striking the match at exactly the right moment so everyone can watch the fire together. And yeah, maybe I could have handled it more professionally, could have pulled Gregory aside privately and had a stern conversation about respect and workplace culture, could have been the bigger person who took the high road and dealt with things through proper channels. But where's the fun in that? Where's the story? Where's the lesson for everyone watching who needed to see that arrogance has consequences? That being a jerk eventually catches up with you? That you can't treat people like they're beneath you just because you think you're standing on top of the mountain, when really you're just standing on a hill and the actual mountain is behind you, watching, waiting, taking notes. Because revenge isn't always about rage or destruction or burning bridges just to watch them burn. Sometimes it's about showing up, smiling, being underestimated and misunderstood and dismissed as unimportant, and then, at the perfect moment, with perfect timing, in front of the perfect audience, letting everyone realize you're the one who signs the paychecks, owns the building, and has been paying for their artisanal shrimp cocktails all along. And if that makes me petty, well, I'm a petty man with a company, a wife who's only mostly annoyed with me, and a laminated copy of Gregory's resignation letter that Liam framed and hung in the office as a motivational reminder. I can live with that.